Hello. Okay, we're good. Chat, can you guys hear them? I hope. A lot of stuff has changed around from a hardware perspective, so I want to make sure we're okay before we start. Um, okay, I think we're good. So, guys, hello. Obviously, we all know each other very well here. But for those of us that don't know you guys, why don't you give just a quick intro to yourself, what you do, whatever you want in the WoW community with MDI, etc. JB, why don't you go ahead first?
My name is JB, otherwise known as J.B. Spent a lot of time bitching about Mythic Plus, doing MDI, doing some high keys. Um, yeah, we've been around a while, so we've done a lot of different things in World of Warcraft, but at this point, it's mostly Mythic Plus.
All right. Big X.
Yo, guys, I'm Zyro. I've kind of been around in the WoW PV scene for a while, Raid and Limit, also cast the MDI. Just here to talk about MDI stuff, I guess.
All right, man. I'm glad to hear you're feeling better, by the way. Zyro, yeah.
Thank you.
Good stuff. And my old friend, Robin, now.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Robin. A tank. Trying to make DK good again.
Yeah, that'll be a bit, but
I mean, you can always try, you know.
true.
Apart from that, I play MDI, I raid, do anything PV related. I even from time to time push high keys, but not going the best right now. Few depletes, but that's me.
All right, guys. Well, good to have you here. So, I mean, I want to preface this by saying I think, hopefully, I speak for all of us when I say this, that the MDI is like, there's definitely going to be some critical things to talk about here. Some things we like, some things we don't like. Everyone's going to have their own opinion. But I think we're definitely all here from a place of fandom and love, right, for the program. We've all been around with it in some capacity for a very long time. So it's definitely coming, at least for me, it's coming from a place of love. I hope you guys feel the same. Otherwise, you wouldn't be pouring all this time and effort into it. But nonetheless, there's obviously, over the years of MDI, some things have developed, some things haven't. So we're here to chat about things because, as JB said, you guys are obviously very involved and very vocal about the MDI from different angles. So I wanted to touch on a few different kind of pillars and topics and then get into, tournament format, stuff like that. I know, JB, you made some suggestions a few days ago as well, but there's a few angles and viewpoints often clashing and intertwining about the MDI. The main stuff you see on social is players and viewers usually, right? Not too much discussion about internal Blizz stuff, so that's something I want to touch on a bit later. But since we have two of you guys here, and Zyro, you played as well at one point, let's talk about player stuff. Player issues, player viewpoints. I know, Lighty/Darky, left a bit ago, JB. Some well-known teams and names have opted to drop out, etc. after Cup 1. What's the issue, right? A lot of complaints about it's not worth the time, input, and money. Actually, that was actually one of the biggest issues. So what do you guys think, JB?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that I think that's been the biggest pain point since really the MDI started, back in Legion, has been that progressively in each season, partly due to just, the natural competitive escalation of the tournament. As teams get better, it requires more and more effort to beat the good teams. So some of it was organic, but then also some of the format changes to the MDI have encouraged teams to spend more and more time. And, some people disagree with me on this, but I think it's objectively true that in a format like speedrunning in PvE, that the value of practice in a speedrunning tournament is more valuable than it is in other esports. And especially, we have a good sister program that you can compare to in a lot of ways with the AWC. And a thing that stands out in my mind, I remember from last BlizzCon, there was a Friday night where like every MDI team that was at BlizzCon was in the building in the Anaheim Convention Center practicing literally until they kicked us out. Like we were there until the security team was coming around like, guys, you have to leave right now. Like we can't, you can't be in the building any longer. And I remember walking back to the hotel and like literally every dude that was competing in the AWC was outside of whatever the hotel they had us at, the Sheraton or whatever. And they were all sitting around on Friday night drinking and hanging out. And I was like, I'm in the wrong esport. Like I picked the wrong one. And it was so clear in that moment that I was like, I fucked up and I should have been a PvPer, because that was, the value of practice for AWC. I feel like, on a per minute basis is just less valuable in the MDI. It feels like in the MDI, every minute that you can practice is valuable, and it's just as valuable as the last minute that you practiced. When they give us this much time, and the format has evolved in a way that they give us more and more time each season. 5-day time trials, 5-day cups. There's just so much time to practice. We'll fill all of it by actually practicing, and it will be useful. It's not just psychological, it's actually useful time spent practicing.
Okay. Now I want to ping you the same question, but I want to add some just numbers here so we're all on the same page. So in current MDI format right now, over the 3 cups, the is $20,000 per cup, and the split is first place team gets 8K, of course, split 5 ways, unless Naowh takes his team's money, which sometimes he does. And then after that, it's 4.5.
No, only once.
4.5K, then 3K, then 1,500. So there's obviously a steep drop off afterwards. And if you're to do the math, we'll get into placements and stuff. But let's say for your kind of middle ground team, 4th, 5th place area. I mean, these guys with 5 days of time trials, and 4 or 5-ish days of cup, like you're accruing many tens of hours, and you're doing something like $3-4 an hour in terms of the potential benefit you can get from this. So just to kind of put things into perspective. So Robin, same toss to you. How do you feel about the issues and the time investment needed, especially being a guy that's usually first, a couple of seconds here and there, but most of the time you guys are on top?
I like the time investment, but I feel like it's it feels like it needs to be bigger for the time investment to be this huge, or spending this much time. Is you can compare it to another esport where this the prize pool is a lot bigger, the investment or involvement is bigger, and it feels like they kind of trying to take that approach to some extent, but the rewards are not the same as other esports, which shows, because people they don't play full time for a team. They have works, they have jobs, they have families. I don't know what people do these days, but I play video games. But anyways, it's just the effort required to put in is just the rewards are not close to being worth it, and that's something that has to change. And it's not even a question about it anymore. It's just it's been shown time after time that there's less and less teams involved, and there's more and more people quitting, because even though you really, really enjoy doing MDI, it's just not, you just can't put hours in. And I would like to see, time trials even being like maybe 1 or 2 days, maybe every time. Potentially even, doing something like 2 new teams every week can join, the 2 bottom teams get to, compete to stay, meanwhile the top tier or the top 6 or whatever you want to call it, they don't need to do time trials. So more people, have because I think that's the biggest, the first step for a good change, is that most people these days, they don't even feel like it's worth to try, because how are you going to compete against the few teams that have the hours required? It's just, even if you're at the same skill level, MDI, like JB said, that every minute, every hour is just valuable practice, and you just won't be able to perform anywhere close to these teams in terms of it is like consistency, strats, anything,
Yeah.
So that would be.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just that something with the time and how much time it takes. Especially, I don't think having 1 or 2 days to practice for the cup is a bad thing. But time trials, which is just an offline event to qualify for the cups, is taking 5 days of just 10 to 12 hours of gameplay, which in return, like JB said, every minute of hour is valuable. It's also going to be played in the cup. So the more it's not like a waste time playing even more in the time trials, because that's just gonna transition into cup practice, and it's just something that really, really has to change, so we can attract more teams, more players, and maybe doing it a Sunday or Saturday Sunday event and then having the cup, but attract a lot more people.
Okay. I think it's certainly an issue that this barrier to entry, like you guys are saying, has started to create more of a rift and gap between team skill levels, and maybe it's not even skill levels, just hours of practice, right? Like, it's daunting for a new team to get into it and to start trying, because why even compete with like JB and Echo and I'm forgetting Perplexed, right? Like, why even try with these teams across all the seasons? So it's starting to widen the gap, and this starts to create issues as well with We'll get to the viewer stuff in a bit, but like a bit staleness in the show and a bit like, oh, first seed versus eighth, there's no upset here, etc. Xyro, you being in the world of casting now, I know you've competed in the past, but I've been there too. But what are your thoughts about after Cup 1, those 3 teams dropping out and this just kind of barrier to entry, and as a result, the widening gap between the teams?
I think it's more prevalent than ever now that both regions are together, that, the lesser teams are going to drop out. And I think it's worse now because the regions are together. So you can really see like how big of a drop off there is when you get to those like 6th, 7th, and 8th ranked teams. But this has always been a problem, right? I remember talking about that. We were having discussions about this back in Columbus like 2 years ago, where the drop off of teams after the first couple of weeks was always a problem, right? Back then, it wasn't necessarily like prize pool based. It was more like, it was still prize pool based, but it was more like the teams couldn't qualify for LAN, so they kind of just gave up. And new teams stopped showing up too, because there was like no reason for them to play. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's always been a problem, but it's just now kind of coming to a head with the whole time investment thing. Now that there's more time investment required for time trials.
Okay. The issue that we're kind of circling around here is that there needs to be more traction for players to be able to do this, both in terms, and you guys step in here and correct me if I'm wrong. Couple major things here. Financial, obviously, like you need to have some kind of, just worth for your time, right? Money worth. And the other is just the love of it, pushing yourself, the glory of winning, etc. Both of which looks like they're lacking. Obviously, the finances are lacking, but even the restriction of, Robin, I know you guys just started, streaming some of your practices, etc. JB, you're on the fence about it. But the amount of exposure do you guys feel is appropriate from the MDI, especially having gone to YouTube now? We'll talk about the YouTube stuff a bit later, but how more, like, what are you guys looking for incentivization as players that you think would draw other players and teams in? JB, what do you think?
Well, certainly it's been, I think anybody that streams for a living is always in the back of their mind thinking of ways that they can grow their community. And it's always been a problem with the MDI that, especially because the way the tournament works, you are sort of encouraged not to stream because you give away strategies, that it's always felt bad that when it's time for MDI, you feel like, okay, I got to put my stream on pause for a month, 2 months, 3 months. I have to disappear for long stretches of time. And especially once, you move to YouTube, at least when it was on Twitch, you might be able to retain some of your viewers that would show up and watch it on the weekends. And, they could feel like they were still kind of part of your stream. Maybe they could spam your emotes in chat or whatever. But now that it's on YouTube, it feels wholly divorced from your stream presence. And, Blizzard's been doing a better job of it this season. They created the WoW Esports Twitter account to try to encourage more spotlighting of the players, but it's been a pretty consistent theme from Blizzard in the past that, whether it's, I don't know if it's corporate rules or what, but they've, it's been very pointedly a Blizzard policy to really not showcase players, to not promote their socials, not promote their streams, and not do anything that could help the players, which has always felt kind of hypocritical, because anyone who competes in the MDI at a high level essentially has to be a streamer. Like, there's really no way for you to have a full-time job outside of the MDI and compete at a high level in the MDI. And the only job that you could really have that you could incorporate the MDI schedule into is to be a streamer. So Blizzard knows that all these guys competing at the highest level are streamers. That's how we can continue to invest this sort of time. But Blizzard doesn't really do anything to help grow our stream presence, doesn't do anything to help elevate my social media profile. Like I said, they've been doing a better job of it this season, but certainly it feels like there could be more effort put in on that end to try to help us out, to make it feel worth it. I think there's this mentality in the community that, like, doing well in the MDI is its own reward, that, like, if you perform well in the MDI, that you'll make it up on the back end. If you go win the MDI, when you come back to your stream, you'll be showered in like love and new viewers and stuff. But that's not the way it ever works. Nobody ever did well in the MDI and then became like Twitch famous. It's always been that the guys that were Twitch famous came into the MDI, and then if you performed well, maybe that would kind of maintain your audience. But I don't recall really a single person, to my knowledge, that has done the MDI and then used that as a springboard to a Twitch career. So certainly, I think Blizzard could do more in order to help us feel like it's worth our time to compete in the MDI. And I have a lot more I could say about it, but I'll let the other guys jump in because I'm sure they have opinions on it as well.
Robin?
Well, yeah, of course, like JB said, with the social media promotions and stuff. I also think they have done a better job this season, but it's like something I miss in general with like MDI. It doesn't feel very personalized. It's like no interviews, live interviews, no, nothing shown from the players that's showing that this is a live broadcast apart from the casters, right? There's no a team wins, there's no interview, there's no nothing, which I really miss, because that's in a lot of esports that you win a game and either the captain or player from your team gets to speak about the good parts, the bad parts, whatever. And then in general, like to make it worth, I don't think, well, personally, me or anyone, I think playing MDI, I don't think anyone started playing MDI because they were like, holy, we're gonna get rich, guys, let's go and win. It's not why you started playing MDI. It was because the love for the game and the love for Mythic Plus, right? And I don't think even if you increase the price pool by 30%, I don't think it's gonna attract a lot more players, because it's just that the time investment is just too much. And if you want to have this time investment, you need to come up with a price pool that's equal to a full-time job, because that's how much time it takes currently to practice from the eye. And I just think that it's not so much about giving players stuff in return. Of course, a bigger price pool is not something you're gonna say no to. But I just feel like players need to be wanting to play, and it's also very dependent on how the current dungeons in Shadowlands are, for example. If the dungeons are not fun, less teams are gonna sign up and stuff like that. But it's mainly time investment, and I don't feel like it's so much about the money. And yeah, like I said, it's always nice with money, but no one really started playing WoW, playing MDI because you wanted to get rich, right? It was from you just enjoyed playing the game, pretty much.
Okay. From the other perspective, a bit trickier, of course. I mean, I've been there too, right? Like, Xyro, the job of the casters is multifold. Oftentimes it's to, as well as I do, to build kind of, zeros to heroes, highlight people's careers, etc. How do you feel from, the casting side and a bit more the internal side things go in terms of, like allowing players to be like more attracted to entering the MDI, to competing in the MDI, providing incentivization for teams to compete? Do you think there's something that could be done better on caster end specifically, or like from the program's end? What do you think?
I mean, definitely things could be done better, right? I think the whole kind of getting the players' names out there is being done a little bit better this year. Obviously, there's like an issue of Blizzard kind of endorsing players by, linking their Twitter or their streams. Well, the streams can't happen with the whole YouTube thing, obviously, but endorsing the Twitters, that's like sort of like a risk on Blizzard's end, right? You can't really like go on stream and say, hey, check out this guy's, Twitter where he talks about the MDI, and then you go to that guy's Twitter and he's talking about how the program is dog shit, right? That's not good for Blizzard in any situation whatsoever. So I think that's kind of why they're hesitant to sort of promote players outside of like doing delayed interview stuff. But no, it definitely, in terms of like exposure, is probably one of the worst esports right now, because the players, like the guys were talking about, with the separation between YouTube and Twitch, they just don't really get much out of it other than just like the prize pool, which, as we've covered, is not really that great.
So what can we keep talking about prize pool, of course, and I don't disagree with Robin. Like, it's initially about the love and the glory, and I mean that's what got me like wanting to involve myself in the program in any way from the start. Money is a factor, though, right? Like, let's be honest. I mean, it's a driving force of why some of the teams have dropped out in terms of just the involvement. The issue with the level of competition as well leads to a lack of involvement from organizations as well. I know Echo just is now with Logitech, grats on that, but in general, you don't see a rampant amount of organizations contributing to the MDI. The Blizzard prize pool, not exactly great. They've had efforts of crowdfunding that went one way or another. Let's just leave it at that for now. It didn't go stellar in the past. So something needs to be done to kind of infuse some attraction into this program. What do you guys suggest? What do you think can be done to start attracting organizations? Because, you know, right now it's kind of like the MDI is as demanding as an esport from the players, and in most other at least competitions and esports, it's fine for the players to pour those amount of hours because they're contracted, right? They're getting paid, they're salaried, etc. You guys aren't. You're almost doing it out of, just like Robin said, the sheer love of it. So what can we do to stimulate some of that growth, JB?
Well, you know, I talked about how it's a lot of times convenient to compare the MDI to the AWC because of how similar they are. But I think another convenient comparison is to the Race to World First. And we've seen over this last expansion just how successful the Race to World First has been. And I think there's some takeaways from that that the MDI could really focus on. One of them is that I think more is not necessarily better. I think the MDI, especially back in Legion, the MDI, you didn't see a lot of your team, of your favorite teams. You know, each region had its one weekend that it got to do its regional cup, and then you had global finals. But there was a lot of space between playing time. You didn't get exposed to those teams every week, every other week. And I think the Race to World First in some ways is really good about that, in that you have this window where you just play degenerate amounts of WoW. I mean, like let's not. I mean, there are certainly issues with the Race to World First, but in the Race to World First, you've got this window where you play a ton of it, but then it just goes away for 6 months. You know, like you don't hear anything at all about the Race to World First for 6 months, and it's not repeatedly thrust in your face over time, and people kind of get a cooling off period, both from the player and the audience perspective. Of like, players can go, you know, you can go do your Path of Exile for, you know, you play your league every once in a while, you can go play whatever the new FPS game is. You get a break from World of Warcraft. Whereas with MDI, it feels like you are locked into this thing for like literally 3 months. Like there's just no break from it, which not only is mentally exhausting, but also it's just really hard to commit that kind of time. Like it's hard to have a life, like literally just a life in general when the MDI is happening. Not even like exploring other you know, career opportunities or whatever. I mean, like I have to like schedule time to hang out with my girlfriend. Like this is the kind of stuff like it's just difficult to even see people when the MDI is happening because of how much time we invest in it. And it would be, I think, in some ways helpful for the MDI to maybe, I know Blizzard has their quotas or whatever that they have to meet for broadcast days, but it would be really helpful from a player perspective if the MDI just, it felt like there was less of it. And that the times you did see it, you know, it's kind of like when you compare like the NFL to Major League Baseball, where the NFL, each team only plays 16 times compared to 162 times per season that baseball games play. But the NFL still makes way more money because when those games come on, they're much more meaningful, much more impactful. People get way more excited for them. And I feel like the MDI could maybe borrow that mentality of like, we don't have to do 4 different cups. Like that's not a thing. And we don't have to do this 4 different times. We could fit the content of the MDI into a smaller schedule. And that solves the issue of prize pool by not having to make the prize pool bigger. You just make the amount of time you have to invest to get the same amount of money smaller. And it has the same effect where now I'm like, okay, look, $300,000 prize pool is still cool, but I only have to put in a month's time to do it, not 3 months of time to do it.
All right.
Just to like jump into, so didn't the first day or two of MDI didn't they be at like over 50K viewers, and then Cup 2 they were like down to 25 or something?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal was. I assume there's embedding issues or something there, because that seems like a wild drop off, just like an unnaturally large drop off because of viewer interest. But yeah, it was very interesting to see the numbers that the MDI came out with the first weekend compared to the second weekend of Cups.
That's actually really consistent with what it was for the first Cup 2 years ago for Legion, not Legion, sorry, BFA. So I don't
that's
think
what
there
I
was
feel
any
is
betting stuff.
people, you know, want to see, but they don't. Also, because I feel like MDI is somewhat repetitive. If you just keep on watching and watching and watching, it's kind of this. We have 8 dungeons. There's only so many teams. Seeing the same teams in the same dungeons every weekend is not super interesting. But if you haven't seen a team, like I said, for almost half a year, and it's this one weekend where they compete, you know, I want to see that, but I don't want to maybe sit and watch them every second weekend for 2 months. So yeah, going back to what you're saying, I think quantity might not, you know, be the most important part. I think less time might be a better thing. because like I said, I've been completely with you on this one with balancing real life with actually practicing for MDI, and it's during the time trial week, it's been 10 to 12 hours 5 days a week. And since I also do raiding on my 2 off days, which I would like to maybe do something in my life, I need to sit and raid. And then we go back to the cup, and it's another 5 days, and then it's 1 day off. It's just an endless cycle for over 2 months of just grinding MDI mainly, but also other aspects of the game, which is not Blizzard's fault because that's something I chose to do, but it's just in general too much playing time, and it's too long. I think it's mainly because MDI is PvE VP. I don't know the right term for it, but it's no you don't need to have another opponent to practice, because you practice against a computer, right? So you can just, if your team is here, you can just go and practice. You don't need to schedule a time with another team like AWC, because if everyone in AWC agrees that okay, we're not going to practice when we get to BlizzCon, no one can practice. But that doesn't work for MDI. If JB says they're not going to practice, right? And I'm going to be like, well, JB, you might not practice, but we're going to practice. It just doesn't work. It's endless. There's amount of practice, and like you said, I think it was Legion, right? We had the European qualifiers and then the American or Oceanic qualifiers, and then they met in the globals a month later or something.
Yep.
I think that was perfect. I think that was just about the time needed. One big cup for Europe, one big cup for Europe, and I don't remember if it was another region involved as well, and America/Oceanic. Perfect, in my opinion.
Okay, you guys, you made a good segue here into one of the other, one of the other major aspects, obviously, of some of the arguments and issues, which directly clash with some of what you guys want as players because of the time commitment already, and that is the viewer side of things, right? A lot of complaints now that things are stale, they're a bit boring to watch, it's just pre-rehearsed dungeons, he's going to win in the first 5 minutes, blah, 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 blah. You guys have heard it, the meta stale, etc., etc. What viewers want is some level of excitement, right? Oh, no, the teams have a chance to mess up. Let's get a random affix in. Pick ban phases for dungeons, for classes. You guys have heard it all. All of these elements start to introduce a relevant level of variance and, to a certain extent, RNG in what otherwise you guys obviously don't want to have to increase your hours. Like, you don't want to have to increase playing 3 tanks, Robin, because in case Vengeance Demon Hunter gets banned and then Blood DK gets banned after that, then you have to learn whatever the next tank will be. So you have to increase your hours and spread yourselves even more thin within that timeline. So how do you guys react as players from all of these concerns, right? And demand for the program to increase its just randomness?
I actually had something I thought was kind of would be really fun, and I feel like we kind of agreed to this as well, talked about it a bit before we started, is that how they have all these, okay, so this week it's Necrotic Wake, which combination of these 4 affixes would you like to see in Necrotic Wake, right? And then you get the map before the cup practice starts, and you have the same amount of time to practice, right? But what I would like to see instead is that since it's going for this many weeks, right, and it's the same dungeons, the same comps, because even though minor balancing is happening, it's not gonna vastly change the comps you bring. Would be instead to, okay, so for Cup 3, either just Blizzard or the community, it's like 2 specs, right? You can just ban before the cup practice starts. So going into Cup 3, you will have, here are the maps. So for Cup 3, Disc Priest and Frost or Fire Mage is banned. You're not allowed to bring any of these classes to any dungeon. You have to bring something else instead. And then, there could be the community or Blizzard, deciding on what to specs, for example. They don't want to see this cup. And then the next cup, they were like, we didn't see Disc Priest and Mage this week. Next week, we don't want to see Vengeance and Hunter. Obviously, would be, people wouldn't pick an enhancement shaman, right? Because no one ever plays it. But it would be a lot more variety, and no week would be like the next week. It would be new, interesting, comps and combinations pretty much every week, and it's not gonna increase practice time that much, in my opinion, because if you're playing healer like JB knows how to play priest, he can play druid, and then if priest is banned, it's gonna be like, oh shit, okay, so I'm gonna play my druid this week for the cups. And same goes for almost like every player. I don't feel like anyone is locked to one specific spec, right? So we just have to do with it, and it would be very fun, I think, to play, and also probably watch, because it's gonna be different. Like I said, probably strats even with different comps, because you can't pull off the same, strats you do with a Vengeance Demon Hunter as you can with a Protpala, and probably not without a mage either. So that would be, I think, very interesting, and it's probably the best solution. Because I've been thinking a lot about what you can change, right? And it's the best, I feel, to bring variety to the dungeons.
Xyro, do you think from like, in the past in the MDI, obviously we've done a lot of like per match things, right? I mean, the players were involved. Both of these guys were involved in those. One team picks like a ban for a map or an affix or something. Do you think Robin's suggestion, which is more of like a per week thing rather than a per match thing, is enough to satiate the evil viewers?
Definitely not. Nothing will ever satiate them. Like, even they don't know what they want. But I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And in terms of like going for the time investment versus payoff scenario, that's probably the best ratio from any other solution that I've heard. That's probably the best solution that I've heard out of any of them. But I mean, no, nothing will ever make it so the viewers are happy. Like, they don't even know what they want.
JB,
I mean, yeah, that's right. But it was also, yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, it's also, we were talking about this, like they had in, I think it was Legion, where you had to pick the affix, right? The last affix, or like, people want class bans, ban a spec bans, ban a spec for the game, and I would never back that up, because I think that's way too much practice hours included. But if you have something preset not long before the cups, but a day or two before the cups, so before you even start practicing that, okay, we cannot practice this week with this specific class or a spec, rather, sorry. I don't think it would be too bad. It's just that if it would be bans, you would have to do the same dungeon with completely different comms several times, right? And that's a lot more practice. But if you ban these in advance a long time before, I think most teams would be able to deal with this. And it's just going to show another, I guess, level of skill as well, that you need to be able to play more than one spec in the game.
JB, I know you're frothing at the mouth to get in on this one.
Well, so I'll say this. I know that it's been a common talking point in the MDI now about this idea of like viewers versus players, and that those two camps have different desires. And I will say this, like, it appears that a common source of frustration is that viewers want to see more variety. But I feel like that's, I don't have like every player on the record with this opinion, but I feel like I can probably speak for most players that as a player, you don't want variety. You want to be able to like pick the class that is strong and then play that class and get good at it and get, really good at it and learn it inside and out for the tournament. And you don't want to have to be like, all right, this week I'm learning Disc Priest. Okay, next week, now that I've learned how to play Disc Priest, next week, Disc Priest is banned. I need to learn how to play Resto Shaman. Oh, Resto Shaman's banned for this next week. Now I got to learn how to play Mistweaver. Oh, Mistweaver's banned. Now I got to learn how to play Holy Priest. And to cycle through that on each tournament is frustrating, because you feel like you don't necessarily ever gain that mastery of a class, and therefore you're not doing the dungeon as well as it could be done. And I would say that probably is what every player aspires to in this tournament, is that if you ask the players what they want to do the dungeons as fast as they possibly can. And that means bringing the best classes. And I think that's probably what the players all want, is like, we want to know that at the end of the day, we did this dungeon as well as it could be done. And that getting the best classes and then figuring out how to play those classes to the utmost is how you do that. But I don't think that the viewers necessarily are on that same train anymore. Maybe at one point, early in the season, they're like, yeah, we'd like to see what the best classes can do in every dungeon. But after 1 or 2 weeks of that, they're like, all right, we feel like we've seen what the best classes can do in this dungeon, and I'm bored of that now. That's no longer what I want to see. Now I want to see you do it with different classes. I want to see what you could do with, a warlock in your group, or with, a survival hunter in your group, or a feral druid. And I feel like that gets back to this issue of, the longer the MDI goes on, the more cups that you have, the more times you see the same thing over and over and over again, the more that the viewers start to be like, why are we doing, we're on Cup 3, Cup 4, you're running the same classes you ran last time, you've improved your time in this dungeon by maybe 15 seconds since last week. We've seen little to no innovation in terms of route running, and certainly not in your class selection. So like, why are we doing this again? Why is there a Cup 3? Why is there a Cup 4 here? Other than to determine which teams are going to finals. And the MDI has never been much of a mystery about which teams are ultimately going to global finals. That seems preordained at the start of every season. You can kind of like circle these 4 or 5 teams and be really sure that they're all going. Maybe the 5th or 6th seed there can be like a little bit of variance there, but for the most part, who's going. So Cup 3 and 4, there's no excitement about like, oh, are we going to see some team get knocked out of global finals from this cup? No, it's all the same teams that have been winning each time. So then it's like, well, then where is the excitement? We're not getting new classes. We're not getting new dungeons. We're not seeing teams losing that we didn't expect to lose. And so from a viewer perspective, I understand like there's got to be something. There's got to be something that draws me into Cup 3. And at this point, it seems like the easiest answer to that is then we change it up. Like Cup 3 needs to look different than Cup 2 did. It needs to look different than Cup 1 did. And bringing in new classes is probably the easiest way to shake that up. I don't know that the players are going to be super excited about that, but at the end of the day, that's what they pay us for, I guess, is the argument is that like, maybe you don't want to be learning a new class every week, but like there's a prize pool here, so shut up. If you don't like it, you can go play live. If you do want to show up and compete in the MDI, here's a prize pool, and you can deal with it and learn how to play a new class and make it fun for the people watching.
Right. So, I mean, this is kind of part of the meta issue, and where problems from both sides start to intertwine because there's just conflicting opinions, and there's no right or wrong side here, right? It's not good versus bad. It's just you guys want consistency and viewership wants variance, right? Like, end of story. The problem is to make you guys want to do that variance or deal with that variance in a more positive basis, you need incentivization, which you just mentioned earlier. So all these things start to kind of culminate and are problematic. But at the end of the day, the viewers need to be able to want to watch and tune in for the MDI, because without the viewers, the program won't succeed long term, right? Zyra, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, from my perspective, I never really understood so much the situation that a lot of viewers see themselves in, where they say it's boring that people are running the same comps. That's not what the point of a speedrunning competition ever is to me. Like I want to see the teams running the most optimal thing, because that means we'll see the fastest runs, and that's what I'm always personally looking for. That's what makes me excited as a caster, is when you have 2 teams running exact comps, running the same strategy, and just seeing who can do it better. That's always the best situation for me to be watching the MDI. And like you wouldn't watch a baseball game and be like, oh god, they're running 4 infielders and 3 outfielders again, this is really boring, I'm turning this off. Like, no, that's not how it works, right? So I never really got that argument too much. Like, I can understand that there are people that think that way, but it's a speedrunning competition. People are always going to run like the best thing that they can. So,
but should it be a speed? But I guess maybe that's the question: is should it be a speedrunning competition? Should the MDI become something else? Because maybe the speedrunning element of it is failing to attract viewership. Maybe that's not what viewers.
I feel like speedrunning is fine, but then we're going back to this watching the same dungeons and the same comps. Speedrunning for 4 cups in a row is not entertaining to watch, right? But if it was only one weekend, it would be hella fun to watch. It would be so much fun to see what these teams have been working on behind the scenes and coming up with. But it's one time. But then when we see, when we go to Cup 2 and Cup 3, the less experienced teams start copying the top teams' routes, and they all, end up playing pretty much the same strats in almost every dungeon with minor tweaks, right? And if we want to keep it a speedrunning competition, which I'm for, because that's I've always been, right? You can't have these 4 cups just, every second week, because something, if you want to keep the viewership and the streams entertaining, something has to change if you want to keep this format. And I think it's mainly like a format issue than what MDI really is issue. You know what I mean? And
right.
Because you can't keep it entertaining for this long without changing something up.
And I think that's what the one-off things are supposed to be for later this year, where they experiment with some format changes, maybe some different types of competition, rather than just the tried and true, or tried and tested, I guess, speedrunning, like team-to-team format. So whenever those happen, I think we'll see like different ideas on how the competition could be run.
Okay.
And to just kind of again go back to how I think the MDI compares to some of the other sort of Blizzard esports, not formal esports, but when you look at the MDI compared to the Race to World First, the Race to World First is very different from the MDI in the sense that you're not seeing a polished product. You're not seeing a guild line up every boss start to finish in the raid and then blast them out back to back to back to back to back perfectly with no deaths. The allure of the Race to World First is watching the struggle of figuring out how to kill this boss, watching a guild wipe 10 times on a boss, 20 times on a boss, 50, 100, 400 times on a boss, and being with them as they learn and figure out and make progress through the fight. And in some ways, I actually think time trials is the more interesting version of the MDI than cup play. I think that is sort of the more natural element of the MDI, is when teams are spending a day in a dungeon and really getting, sinking their teeth into it and figuring out, like when Echo streamed their time trials where you sit in Sanguine Depths for like 10 hours and you're like, okay, let's try this route. And I don't like that. Let's try this one. Okay. Now, well, what about these canisters though? Okay, that's good. What if we string the canisters together and we run a 10 buff from 1 to 1 to 1, and you like watch the evolution of the dungeon? And to me, that's, I think, where the speedrunning format gets its popularity, is watching people figure it out, not watching the final product. It's in watching them get to the final product. But the way the MDI is set up right now, that's exactly the stuff we don't want to stream, because it's valuable to our competitors. It's valuable when other people see that progress that we're making, when they see our insight into the dungeons, and it's like, I don't really want to share that with other teams. Like, that's a problem. And so I don't know if there's a way to make to make the MDI possible to be like streamed and not give away that kind of competitive advantage. But I think it would be the most compelling viewership would be if you could have teams struggling their way through a dungeon and you following along with them, seeing them learn this dungeon. And then when they finally do it right, when they do the sub 10-minute Atoll run, everyone's like, oh my God, dude, they finally did it. Sub 10 Atoll. Well, I was here for it, Pog. Instead of watching the finished product, expecting it to look perfect. And the only excitement comes from when they fuck it up.
Okay. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be enjoyable to watch as well, but it kind of goes against like any esport. Like, you don't want to give, no matter what type of esport, even Race to World First, it's not an esport, but it's a competition, right? Streaming your practice and your strats is never going to be beneficial. It's not like weird, like when we streamed Sanguine and we come up with like, holy shit, we should just, extend the lantern to lantern to lantern, and we did it and it worked. We were like, oh fuck, we streamed this. Everyone's gonna do this now, and it's just something that most teams never want to do, because what's the benefit of doing that? You just give away a 6 strat for no reason, kind of, if you're not a streamer, for example. And that's the same with like the Race World First. Someone comes up with a fantastic strat and a boss, and then you just, you stream it, so you give it away to the competition, right? The same in any esport, counter, name it. If you give away your aces up your sleeve, it's not good, right? So how would you incentivize people to stream their practice in the first place? It's very hard, I feel like.
Do you guys think? I mean, everybody appreciates the amount of time that goes into practice. I mean, it was one of the main themes we discussed at the beginning of this show. But do you guys think that keys are too easy? Should there be more challenge in the end and actual potential for you guys to wipe even after pouring those practice hours? Taking this from a viewer perspective as well. Obviously, you guys might not want that specifically, but just seeing flawless runs and the only excitement is like, oh my God, Echo wiped once in like 10 dungeons kind of thing. Should there be a bit more danger?
I mean, I think the only way you're going to get more danger in the runs is by giving us less time to practice. There's this idea, by the way, this idea that circulates in the community that higher keys are more difficult, which is not true necessarily. Individual enemies in higher keys are more difficult, and maybe like a boss is more difficult if you can't pull trash onto it. But almost as a rule in the MDI, if a pull is too easy for us, we're going to try to figure out how to make it more difficult. If we're doing a boss and we're like, wow, this boss just fell over. Okay, well, what should we save lust on this boss? Should we not use lust for this? Should we not use should we skip prideful before this boss because we don't need the buff? Should we find trash to pull onto this buff? Or if you're doing a big trash pull and you're like, that died too quick, could we drag more stuff into it? Is there stuff, are there cooldowns that we could hold for it? So we make the dungeons hard. That's the whole point, is to figure out how you can do the most efficient route through the dungeon as possible, and that includes making the dungeons artificially more difficult for yourself in order to go faster. And I believe in that sense, actually, lower keys in a lot of ways are more difficult than higher keys, because you have more leeway to build your own pull in a lower dungeon. If you're trying to do like a 22, there's just a point where you can't, it's like, this boss is too difficult to do anything else with it. Like, I can't pull more stuff onto it. It doesn't mean the boss is harder on a 22 than it is on an 18, because on an 18, you might drag trash onto it and make it than it would be on a 22. But on a 22, that option is just out the window. The boss is now too hard to bring anything else onto it. And so I feel like the dungeons that we do in these lower level keys are oftentimes assumed to be easier because they're lower. But it's like, nah, dude, like, try doing that dungeon one time and then tell me that you think it's easier than like the 20s or 22s that you're doing on live.
Okay. Xyro, I see you nodding your head a lot.
Yep.
Robin, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Good input, Xyro.
No, I feel like something, if you want to, see the teams suffer more, then it's not suffer, but, struggle, I guess, more. It has, it's practice time, and also maybe not even giving away affixes, because then teams can still practice. They can still play their favorite specs, classes, whatever, but you cannot practice the same amount of hours, right? Because you don't know what you're gonna play. Yeah, of course you can sit there if you really want to. You can sit and practice 20 hours a day for potential affix combinations, right? But if it's gonna be more of on the spot decision making, and you have to be reasonable with your decisions, and it's gonna be a lot more wipes for sure. It's gonna be a lot more deaths, and maybe it's gonna be slower runs, but maybe that's what people like, because I feel like as a viewer, there's nothing more. The chat doesn't go as crazy as when a team has a full team wipe. And viewers love that. I hate it, but they love it. So I mean, if that's the route we want to go, then give every team less practice times. Maybe even hide the affixes, because you will see a lot more fuck ups. Because right now, when you see a low key and like, oh my god, this is so easy, but they don't see that we did this pull like at Hull sub 10. Oh, this is so easy. But yeah, it's easy because we did a pull 200 times. Of course, it's gonna be easy after 200 times, right? But you don't see what went into these pulls in the first place. But if you had 0 or like very few times to practice this, it would not be an easy dungeon at 18. Let me tell you that much. I guess I wouldn't mind it too much, but it's something you could do to make MDI maybe more interesting for the viewers. But then again, like, would players actually want to sign up for this? It's always this, viewers want something and the players want another thing. A lot of the times, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean that's the issue, right? It's a lot of opposite, but there's a third kind of crowd, right, or important group to discuss here, because a lot of what I see on social, a lot of what's discussed is often players versus viewers. We want this, we don't want this. And that's really the restrictions or the format, etc. Well, actually, we'll get specifically into rules and format. I know, JB, you want to talk a bit there too, but and that's internal Blizzard stuff, right? The guys who set up the tournaments, the restriction of the developers, and the balance they make, the balance they don't make. At the end of the day, as you guys mentioned, this is a PvEVP competition, not a direct PvP thing. Things are going to get stale, for lack of a better term, if things aren't kept fresh from a program development perspective, whatever that may be. We've discussed about, a few things, pick bans, et cetera, et cetera. But not too much has really changed over the course of 4 years, right? The general format and concept of the MDI and this head-to-head environment, which is really just kind of an illusion, right? You don't need to have head-to-head in a PvEVP. It doesn't matter if JB and Robin's team are going at the same time. It doesn't matter if 10 teams are going at the same time, right? They don't affect each other. It's just about who does the dungeon the fastest. So is this format still working out? Like, Xyro, what do you think, right? Because you're on internal right now. After all this time, after 4 years of MDI, do we need to shake things up a bit? Do we need to change the format a bit?
I mean, I think in order, like, yeah, I think it's definitely gotten stale, and something needs to be done to change it. Like, I can't figure out for the life of me what it would be, but You know, there are some people, like for instance, Keystone Masters is experimenting with different things. Like I said earlier, we have the one-off things that are going to be experimenting with some format changes. But I mean, I think the biggest problem with it is like exactly what you mentioned, right? It's technically PvP, but not really, because most of that is just psychological, right? Like the most team versus team thing you see at all is like your team saying, okay, we're going up against Naowh's team. We better not fuck up, or we have literally zero chance of winning. Also, we probably need to pull bigger than we normally do against other teams because they're just that much better than most teams. Like, it's completely psychological. The head-to-head aspect really doesn't exist. So it's kind of weird, and it's entirely unique as an esport because of that, but also I think it suffers from that as well.
JB?
Yeah, I mean, so kind of going back to an earlier point that was made about that, I think a lot of the excitement right now from the MDI comes from failure. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but from a player perspective, it doesn't feel good. And I said, like, it may be that what viewers want to see is more fuck ups by the teams. Like, maybe that's what makes it exciting for them. But the problem is that from a player perspective, like if I were to open up, God forbid, if I were to open up YouTube chat on the day of the tournament, if we had been given dungeons where the affixes were announced to us, like an hour before the dungeon and given no opportunity to practice, or if we'd been handed classes that we didn't have a lot of time to work on and we're just kind of YOLOing it, like nobody's going to watch us wipe and be like, well, I appreciate that these guys were out of their comfort zone, so I'm going to give them a pass here. Instead, it's going to be like, laugh my ass off. This guy is an idiot. I can't believe this is the dude in the MDI, innate brain. Like it like the toxicity will not abate at all. It'll just be way more of it. Like when they see us fail, there will be no appreciation of like, yeah, I recognize what they're doing is really hard, so I'm going to cheer them on for at least having the courage to try it. It'll be like, oh my God, this is the best that WoW has to offer. Like, I'm going to go back and watch CSGO. And so like encouraging the format to make it more exciting by giving more failure, like that doesn't I'm not really excited about that as a player. That doesn't make me
I agree. Yes.
excited to compete in that, because I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that, because that is part of the problem with the MDI right now, from a player perspective, is like when we do well, it's just expected. Like when we slam a dungeon, everyone's like, kind of golf clap. That's what you're supposed to do. It's only when we screw up that we ever get a reaction from anybody. And then it's like, oh, this guy's a moron. He's brain dead. And you never really get celebrated. You only get shit on. And I feel like in that way, I was talking about like the comparison to like Race to World First. When you watch Race to World First, the expectation is you're going to wipe. Every pull that you do is a wipe until you finally kill it. And so you watch somebody struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle. And the expectation is that there will be struggle. And then the pog moment is when they finally succeed. But in the MDI, you invert that. Instead, it's succeed, 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 succeed. That's what you become accustomed to. And the pog moment is when somebody finally fucks up. And then you latch onto that and you're like, yes, that guy died. He's an idiot. And like that doesn't feel good as a player. And I don't necessarily want to lean into a format that encourages that.
How do you, let me interject here for a second. How do you encourage the Race to World First style where failure is expected and the success is the pog in MDI world?
And well, that's the big question. That's $1 million question in my mind, is like, how do you turn it into a format where I feel like the success is the part that is, I feel like if you can figure that out, you get everyone on the same page. If you can make a format where players succeeding is the exciting part, then I feel like player and viewer interests are aligned. Then we're both trying to do the same thing. Instead, it feels like there's almost like a competition between the players and the viewers, where I'm trying as hard as I can not to fuck up, and the players are like, fuck up, fuck up, fuck up, idiot, fuck up, fuck up. I'm only here to see you die. If you succeed, I didn't have a fun time. If you do this dungeon cleanly, I'm bored. I only want to see you die. And I feel like we have different goals there. And I feel like that leads to tension in the broadcast where we're not trying to do the same thing. And therefore we're going to have different ideas of how the broadcast should be done.
Legit, I will 100% be honest with you. When I was casting, the most exciting stuff to cast outside of like, one of those once in a blue moon dungeons where it's like down to 5-second difference between the two teams, you're going ham on the last boss. It doesn't happen too often. But the most exciting stuff to cast is just like bloodbaths, right? Xyro, I mean, let's be honest. Like we remember like Seed of the Triumvirate and Legion, like, you know, multiple, because I mean, within reason, that stuff is exciting because it starts to throw just variables into, oh, this team's no longer 15 minutes ahead, right? Like there's a chance now. What's going on here? And I hear you from like a player perspective. Definitely not fun because we don't want to be celebrating the crap moments, the failures, right? We want to celebrate the awesome stuff with you. Robin, I see you shaking your head a lot at what JB was saying.
No, it's just funny because I completely like agree when I think about it. For example, the only moment I remember from this MDI in particular is when I completely fucked up in Spires, right? And everyone celebrated that I flew back on the Angel. It was the best moment ever happening, right? And I felt so bad about it because I just, you know, threw the entire game in that one moment. But everyone thought it was, you know, oh, this is you know, the best thing that ever happened this MDI because people like that. And even though I don't agree, it became funny. But you know, during the time when it happened, I was, you know, panicking. I don't remember what I did. And then in the end, it turned out like a big meme and it was funny, right? But people and viewers, they just want people to fail. And that's something I realized when I started watching, rewatched rather, the Legion MDI. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I think it was even the grand finals between, at the time, Method and A, JB, your team, and Chelsea Angels, I think it was. And it wasn't a single map where a team had a clean run. And I think the issue is that the teams at this point they're too good. I think the format was made when teams were not as experienced and not as good at running dungeons as they are now. Because not a single dungeon had a 0 death counter at the end of the dungeon. I watched like Chelsea Angels beat Method NA with 13 deaths, right? And Method NA had like 17 or something. And the you know, it was very, very rare that you got to see a very, very clean run in any series. But now it's like if you have 2 deaths, you probably lost, right? Because the team is so established and so good. So the you know, you can't afford making mistakes. But back then, even though you had a full team up, you could still win the game. But you can't do that now, and that's why I feel like the POG moment has shifted from when a team like they had a completely clean run, you know, and then that was exciting to watch. But now it's like, oh, another clean run. Can't just, you know, JB die here, or can't now fly back on this Angel instead. I feel like it might be a format, you know, being outdated or something. Because I just feel like the teams are too good for the format to be interesting right now.
Xyro, I see you shaking your head a lot. What do you think?
No, I
Go ahead.
yeah, I completely agree with what he said. Like, for instance, my team in that same MDI, we were the second seeded North American team, and I think we got second place in that tournament with over 130 deaths throughout the entire bracket. So yeah, teams were definitely a lot worse back then, and that made it a lot more exciting.
Well, but also you have to remember that it's not the same tournament anymore, and this gets back to the question of there was, you know, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today with adding different, adding more variants to the dungeon pool that existed in Legion. You know, it used to be that the loser picked the map, and not only picked the map, but picked one of the affixes. And the dungeons got progressively higher as the tournament went along. In grand finals, you started day one with, I think it was like level 23 keys. And then somewhere between the first round and like day 2, the pool started becoming 24s. And then on day 5, it eventually went to 25s. And so you had, I remember one of the frustrating parts of Legion MDI was that there were dungeons where you had to have a route in mind for a 23 and a route in mind for a 25. And otherwise the dungeon was the same, except that you just, one was 23, one was 25, and you would have different routes. And it was really hard when you were in the middle of running a 23 or a 25, trying to remember, okay, is this the one where we pulled the 2 trash packs together? Or is this the one where it's too hard to do that and you can't do that anymore? And trying to keep that, you know, when you're in the middle of slamming the key as fast as you can, a lot of times you go on kind of like autopilot and you're just doing the route that you've practiced over and over and over. And when there's a 23 versus 25, your brain crosses signals sometimes, and you go to do the thing that you're used to doing on the 25 and you're like, oh shit, it's the 23. And so that existed in the Legion MDI, where you had more curveballs, as Naowh mentioned earlier, more things that a team wasn't prepared for. And I think that lent itself to a tournament that was more you were more likely to fuck up in the middle of a key because it wasn't just the one key that you were practicing over and over. It was like, all right, we're going to do this dungeon, but it could have bolstering on it, or it could have explosive, or it could have sanguine. We're going to spend a little bit of time practicing each one of these so that we're not completely off guard if we get dragged into this match. But there was a definite advantage to being the loser coming into the next dungeon because you got to set up so much of what you wanted. You got to pick the map, you got to pick the affixes on it, and it made it a lot harder.
Isn't that a good
to be
thing, though,
prepared.
sort of interrupting?
That's
this.
yes.
Not exactly that system, but right now I feel like almost every MDI game is, at least from the seed 1 to 8, or like the where there's bigger gaps, is that it's most likely a 2-0. A lot of the games, the majority of the games are a 2-0, right? Sometimes it's a 2-1 if a team does a major fuck up, but if you lose, you have no way of getting an advantage in the series, right? Which is something I kind of want. That if you lose the first game, you should have a slightly higher chance of maybe beating the team in the next game.
Doesn't this go contrary to what we were talking about at the beginning? This would require more variance from you guys, right? From the players.
No, I don't know like what the right solution would be to give them a slight advantage. It probably will be more practice time, but I just feel like it would be nice that even if you lost, you have like, okay, at least like this is what we're really good at, this one right here, we can beat them in this one. But you never have that option really in MDI. It's just, oh, we lost the first game, probably gonna lose the second one as well. But like in AWC, for example, if you lose, you get to select, I don't know exactly what it is, but is it map and comp, or I don't know what exactly it is. And you had that in BFA that you could choose the map, right? But also now in Shadowlands is only 8 dungeons, right? So you don't have the same variance compared to BFA. But I'm missing this like one. It doesn't have to be a big thing, just something small that gives us this tiny advantage, right?
And JB made a good point earlier. It's that Blizzard decides the finite time you have to practice, right? So if they set it to 48 hours, 72, 96, doesn't matter. Let's say they set it to 3 days, right? Theoretical future example. That is the amount of time you have to practice. Do you guys as players want to be able to use that time with no variance, practice the dungeon to death, 0 death run, or would you appreciate if they went back to a more Legion-ish style version where it could be a new affix, it could be a class ban, it could be one of several maps that could be picked by the loser? You still have a finite amount of time to practice, but you cannot hammer one to perfection anymore. JB.
Well, so we've used the term PvE/VP, and I feel like in a lot of ways the MDI, a speedrunning competition, but a head-to-head speedrunning competition, is sort of weird because you have this duality in your mindset where when I do a dungeon on a cup weekend, I have 2 opponents. I have the dungeon itself that I'm trying to beat, and then I have the other team, and that sets itself up to be disappointing in a lot of ways. Because if I do the dungeon really well, if we do the route that we chose and we do it clean as hell, we have 0 deaths, we blasted it, and we still lose to the other team because they ran the route better, that doesn't feel good. You feel like I did what I was supposed to do. Like I did my dungeon as fast as I could. I didn't make any mistakes, and my team played its ass off and we still lost. That feels bad. On the flip side, you win some matches even though you played like shit because the other team played more like shit. And when you go in and you have a 15 death run and you wipe 2 or 3 times and you still win, I mean, it feels, I guess, good to beat the other team, but you're not proud of that. You don't walk away from that match being like, yeah, dude, we won. You're just like, thank you, God, this dungeon's finally done. And so it feels weird to have sort of 2 different opponents in the same match where you're competing both against the dungeon and against the other team. And right now, that's the way that when you give us one set of affixes in a dungeon, when there's not a lot of variables, I feel like you focus a lot on the dungeon itself, on wanting to make the dungeon as perfect as possible. When you know exactly what you're going to get, then your focus is on just wanting to do, the dungeon with these affixes, and you start to do these like very specialized pulls. Like you can only do this pull on this affix combination because otherwise, if there was any other set of affixes, it wouldn't work. Or the affixes themselves, bolstering, for instance, you might do a pull because you bolster the hell out of a mob that then you can use to kill another mob or something. You wouldn't do that on any other set of affixes. And I feel like if you started introducing randomized affixes, that teams would maybe stop practicing so specialized, and you just get more of an idea of how you're going to go through the dungeon. Like, all right, we want to pull these packs in this order, but we're not going to do these like hyper specialized tech pulls where we have like some really specific thing in mind. But rather just like, this is kind of the general way we want to go through the dungeon. And I feel like in that sense, maybe you're less focused on wanting to do the perfect dungeon and more focused on just like, all we got to do is go faster than the other team. Like, we recognize this dungeon is not going to be perfect. We recognize there's going to be, there's going to be some deaths. There's going to be some sloppiness. These pulls are not going to be, picturesque, put this on a postcard, send it to your mom type pulls. It's just going to be good enough to win the dungeon. And I feel like in that way, maybe if you had more variability in the affixes in the dungeon pool, that you stop being on doing like the end all be all dungeon and just doing a good dungeon and being content with that.
Xyro. All right, Xyro. No, that's not bad.
You cut off when you said.
Oh, sorry, I just said Xyro. I was watching, and you're like,
it sounded very similar to when you said Naowh's name earlier, and I'm like, man, I don't want to talk when he says something to Naowh again.
Oh, no, you're good, man. And well, I mean, any other? You guys already kind of talked about this, so we can move on a bit. But Xyro, now, do you want to add anything to what JB said? With like maybe introducing a bit of decreasing specialization in runs, I guess is a good way to put it. What do you think? Positive idea?
I think there are some arguments both ways. I think if you do that and you also cut down on the potential practice time, like, make time trials 2 or 3 days, and then make, I think the cup, you guys agree that the cup is like probably fine right now, like 1 day before it actually starts is probably okay.
Right now it's 2, but
right now it's 2, okay.
Or let's say it's the evening. I guess you get the maps on, at least for Europe, 7 p.m. And then on Wednesday, and then you have from 7 p.m. till whenever you go to bed, and then you have Thursday.
And then you have Thursday.
7 p.m. on Friday. It starts, right? So it's a day and a half, and I think that's fine. I don't. It's not the cup itself. I think most people can make time for the cup. It's mainly the time trials. I think that is the biggest issue currently.
I think cutting down on time trials plus adding in a tiny bit of variance, and not too much, right? You don't want to like make lives completely miserable for the players, but a little bit of variance to make it a little bit more difficult would definitely make it more exciting, right?
Make time trials completely non-independent, or like non-dependent on the cups. Like the 3 games you practice in time trials are not going to be the same three dungeons you have in the cup, and then that would be like maybe so they're like completely disconnected from each other. And I think that's the only way you could ever reduce practice time required. Because even if you only have 1 day of practice in time trials, it's a PvE, VP, as we call it, right? And even though you only play 1 day, you need to only qualify 1 day. What are the top teams gonna do, JB? What are you gonna do after you qualify if you have 3 dungeons? You're gonna sit the entire, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday before you get the other maps in practice, because that's what you need to do to win. So you need to disconnect the time trials from the cup in the first place. So you can't just sit and practice, even though you only have like 1 evening to qualify. Because after you qualify, you just gotta practice more.
Well, the crazy thing to me is I actually think that that change to the time trial format being the same affixes as the cup affixes was initially supposed to be something to where, okay, well, if they get the 3 time trial dungeons and the same affixes as what they'll be for the cup, that'll actually cut back on practice time. But it ended up backfiring because you just end up spending all of time trials practicing those 3 dungeons.
Well, the thing is, nothing will ever cut down on practice time except literally a hard limit on practice time. Like any effort Blizzard makes to be like, well, we'll do this thing because it will encourage teams not to practice, is like, no, we'll just practice different things. Like, if you've made it so that we don't need to practice one thing, we'll still fill up all the time that you give us. We'll just do something else with that time instead. So the only way to ever stop us from practicing is like actually just to either walk into my house and disconnect my internet, or to like shut off access to the servers, or limit our ability to like make keystones. Blizzard has done that at various points in the tournament realm where the keystone vendor ceases to exist and you literally can't make keystones to go practice. That's the only way you're ever going to stop us from practicing. Otherwise, we'll just practice different things.
Okay. Continuing this topic of kind of internal Blizz setup, etc. One thing that at least I consider, I don't know, this is why we're here to get your guys' thoughts. Something that stunts the program or prevents its full growth is that the MDI very much is an adaptation of, a program from a base PvE retail game that people pay a subscription for, etc. It's not something that is built for esports specifically. And, you can tell that in the balance, right, of classes that never comes, things like shadow meld, bugs in dungeons, etc. There's no dedicated effort to a specific M+/MDI world of balance for things. Does that impact its growth? What would you guys like to see going forward with that, if anything, Robin?
Can you repeat that question one more time? I completely spaced out midway through that question. I'm sorry.
Let's go with JB, and then based on his answer, you'll see what we're talking about.
All right. So yeah, in terms of like more dedication to the Mythic Plus format, first let me get on a soapbox here, since you've given me somewhat of an opportunity to segue into this. I'd like to talk about how ridiculous it is that we have a Blizzard esport, a formal Blizzard esport that is officially endorsed by Blizzard, that is going to have max eye level of 220 in the game. Okay. This is the strangest thing to me in my mind, that a format in the game that Blizzard has chosen to turn into an official esport, they don't even treat as a legitimate form of end-game content in their live server. It's the weirdest relationship I've ever seen with an esport in a game, that it's important enough to make its own esport, but not important enough to get 226 gear. So like, in some ways, I feel like Blizzard is doesn't even know what it wants to do with Mythic Plus internally. Like, I don't even think Blizzard has a unified idea internally of what they want from Mythic Plus. But then, more to the point of the MDI itself, I think that a lot of the problem with the MDI is that you don't, like, what you see in the MDI isn't what you get on live servers necessarily. I know that's a common complaint that you hear from people that watch it, is that like, when I see teams go and do these enormous pulls on an 18 key in the MDI, it's not the kind of stuff that I can take back to my group and do on a live key. And in some ways it's like, well, maybe that's not what the point of the MDI is supposed to be, is like giving you stuff that you can do on live keys. But in a different way, it's like, when you watch the AWC, maybe the meta is a little bit different in the AWC compared to what it is on live. But for the most part, what you're watching in the AWC is what you're seeing in an arena match yourself. When you queue up for arena, that's what you're seeing. But when you watch the MDI, you're not seeing what you see in a pug key. And some of that is just the nature of the competition itself, but some of that is the way the MDI is set up. And, I guess I feel like, to the extent that we could make the MDI more like live, or make live more like the MDI, and that's one thing that I've talked about in the past is that on live, it's all about pushing the key as high as you can push it. But that's because of the way Blizzard has built the system. And I feel like in a lot of ways you could solve a lot of problems with the infinite scalability of keys and whatnot by instead making an MDI system on live, or making live more like an MDI system where a key only goes up to 20. And then after it hits 20, you stop pushing. And it just becomes like, this is now the highest this key can go. And instead we're going to focus on seeing how fast you can do this 20. And that becomes the new focus on live, is about speed running 20s. And then all of a sudden, guess what? The MDI looks a lot like what you're doing on live. Like, now the MDI format very much resembles what live keys look like. And so I feel like part of the problem with the MDI is simply that Blizzard has also turned it into a thing that is very different. In some ways the same, but in some ways very different from what you see on live servers. And I feel like that doesn't help the tournament either, because at the end of the day, the whole reason the MDI exists is to encourage people to do dungeons. Blizzard certainly isn't doing the MDI to make money off of it. They've shown through the way that they run the tournament, they don't do any advertising, they don't have any sponsors that come in and promote stuff. I can't imagine that Blizzard makes very much money off of this outside of the YouTube contract. You don't see a lot of monetization of it. So the goal of this must be to encourage people to play World of Warcraft, and specifically to go do Mythic Plus. And when you're watching a thing in the MDI that does not very much resemble what you actually do in live keys, it's kind of like, well, then what's even the point of the MDI? If the point of the MDI is to get people excited about doing dungeons, but the thing that they're watching isn't what they're going to be doing in the dungeons, then how are you supposed to get them excited about doing those dungeons?
Zara?
I think a counter argument to that is a very, very small portion of people that do M+ at all are going to ever do something over an 18, right? There are certainly a lot of people that will, but it's such a minuscule percentage that that's not really a concern in general.
Okay.
There's also something we
you cut up the speed now.
Yeah, I'm good. No, but something we I don't know if it was we who talked about that in the past, which is like, it's kind of weird that Mythic Plus is such a popular thing. It's something people, even if it's like doing a weekly key every week or pushing high keys, it's Blizzard haven't even implemented a ranking system. It's Raid.io, an external website doing the rankings, right? It's not even a leaderboard in the game for Mythic Plus. And why is that? Well, why haven't, it's successful, people love it, people want to do it, but why haven't they even implemented a leaderboard or like rating or anything in game? No rewards or nothing for doing high keys. And to me, it's really, I'm just confused because it's so much potential, even if it's MDI with just high keys. And then people love rewards, right? And then why haven't you made something with Mythic Plus? Why is this still just like either you do weekly key or you push high keys, so you go to an external website and check your score? For example, we talked about you could implement MDI in ways where it's similar to AWC, right? Where you queue up and it's only like 18 keys, and you can either queue as 5, you can queue as solo, and you fight another team in the dungeon, and then who completes the dungeon the fastest wins points. So it's like a game to game, right? And it could be a leaderboard and rewards, and it's like so much stuff you can do with Mythic Plus in mind. That is just, I'm confused they haven't done anything. And then, like JB said, with the MDI, it's not really what you get on live servers. I kind of agree with that. But then, how are you? Then like either MDI or live keys has to change. And I don't think people doing high keys want it to change. I don't think people doing MDI want it to change either. So I don't know.
Well, and let me jump in on that point. There's another thing about the MDI. Like I have in what little spare time I have during the MDI season, thought about what it is about the MDI that makes me want to compete. Because not that I want to give any ideas to Blizzard here, but I feel like you could actually remove the prize pool from the MDI and the top teams would still compete. Because I don't feel like any of us really do it for the money. I feel like you could run an MDI for $0 prize pool and you still have a lot of the same teams show up, because we do it because we enjoy it, not necessarily because we're making money off of it. And the money's nice, I'm not going to turn it down, but we were doing this when the prize pool was a lot smaller, and I think we're here for the love of the game. But one of the things that really draws me to the MDI, one of the things that I think I've asked myself, like, why do I like the MDI more than live keys? And I think the reason is because you actually get to practice the keys. And I don't mean spend 12 hours a day practicing, but what I do mean is that on live servers, when you fail a key, it drops the key a level. And it didn't always used to be like that, but it got changed pretty early on in the Mythic Plus system to when to where it used to be that you would deplete the key and it would stay the same level, and you could go back in and run that key over and over and over and over.
Oh yeah, remember
that?
Right? Just a grade out, right? And it would just be a depleted key, right?
And you wouldn't get loot from it until you actually timed it. But I feel like that to me is what draws me to the MDI, is the ability to go in and practice a dungeon over and over and over until I get it. As a perfectionist, that is the part of the MDI that really draws me in, is the ability to go in and work on a key until I have it exactly the way I want it, until I've got the route. I feel like I have ironed out the route completely. It's, I feel like there's no wasted energy in the key. Everything that we're doing is for a purpose, and we're not YOLOing anything. Everything is done for a reason, and we've tried out different strategies. We've pushed ourselves to the limit in the key and figured out, is this pull even possible? Whereas I feel like a lot of live key right now is you just have to open up MDT and look at it and go like, all right, we've never tried this on a 24 before. Do you think we can do this pull? And then you have to sit there and just think about it and go like, I don't know, like, do we have enough kicks? Would we live long enough? I don't know. Let's not do it, because you just want to be safe. Your goal is to time the key, not to do the key as fast as possible, but just to time the key. And so I feel like it lends itself to a more conservative approach on live keys, where you have to do a lot more guesswork and theoretical work rather than actually getting to go in and test stuff. And in a lot of ways, I wish they would bring back the depletion system on live, where I can go in and fuck a key up and then come back in and do the same key and fuck it up again, and come back in and do the same key and fuck it up again until I've got the key exactly the way I want it. And I finally time it. And I think if you brought that system back to live, I would get the same enjoyment from live keys that I get from MDI keys right now.
You want to pitch in on that?
Is it my name?
No. I said, anybody want to pitch in on that? Sorry, my mic was
no. I mean, if to me, it's just two completely different events. I enjoyed high keys a lot, mainly in Legion. And it was super fun too, because you were pushing yourself and, oh, we did a higher key level and we increased by 1, we increased by the end. It's different to MDI, even though MDI is, what I'm truly for, which is, when you just grind all the practice and you get this amazing run and amazing end result, right? Because even though I time at 31, I was never really like proud of a 31 key, because I was like, okay, so we fucked up here, that pull was not good, he died here, and then we were slow on running. It never, like, the key was never, optimized properly. It was just, okay, we did what we had to do in order to time it. It was just, but we could have done it 2 minutes faster if we were able to practice the key. But it was good enough to time the key, and it's good enough. Good run, And I don't know. It's just high keys is more, execute. You just have one attempt of doing this, so play safe and make sure you don't mess up badly. And as long as you have enough damage to time the key, that's what you need to do. You shouldn't do as less spicy things as possible, right? Meanwhile, MDI is just keep add stuff until you just can't make it anymore, and then maybe you need to remove something, and then in the end you're gonna have a super fast run. But it's gonna feel really, really rewarding if you manage to pull it off. And I don't know how you would combine the two or anything. It's just, for me, it's always been two very different type of events. But yeah, like I said, with maybe a leaderboard kind of similar to AWC, being able to queue up, having rewards every season, mounts, anything, MDI style kind of. For me, that would be super fun. But I haven't really heard anything about it, so I'm not expecting anything to really change either.
Okay.
Also, sorry, the worst part about high keys and live keys is the fact that it's just RNG. There is to me, high keys is not really about skill. It's just about playing enough to, in the end, actually getting the right keys. Because it's no skill in getting a 32 missed. Oh shit, we had 132 missed this week, but we had 15 32 theaters that we can't do anyway, but we're just unlucky. It was nothing with skill in that. It's just, oh, we didn't have enough hours to play, right? Meanwhile, another team, they had 5 mists, so they beat us, and that's what probably my biggest issue with high keys is that it's just too much RNG involved. Is not enough skill to make it fun, because you can just feel like you've been playing so good so much, but you've been so unlucky and never getting the right keys anyway, so you just didn't get the score you feel like you should have had at the end of the week. And the best bug in MDI or in the high keys that was ever in the game was that you could actually delete your keys and get 5 fresh keys, but it was it was a bug, and they're like, I'm gonna fix that, and everyone was like, no, please keep this. It was actually so good because we could actually play way less and still get decent keys, but I don't know why they actually removed that, because it was such a great bug to actually exist in the game.
Yeah, lack of control over keys on live is definitely has been a touchy subject. Let's move along here, though. Actually, now I'm going to throw this back to you, because I remember asking you your thoughts about this on Twitter, and other people, of course, as well. But let's talk about dungeon design briefly. Yeah. A lot of complaints. I know now, like you said, I don't like the dungeons as much now. They're too linear. There's not as much room for creativity from an MDI run standpoint, etc. If you actually look at the dungeon breakdown, the linearity between Legion dungeons and now is really not vastly different. But what do you think about the concept that because M Plus and MDI was new in Legion, there was that kind of honeymoon phase with it? You know what I mean? It's new, it's shiny, it's fun, it's cool. And because of what you guys just complained about as well, lack of development over 2 expansions now, not really much has changed, both on live and MDI. So do you think it's still the dungeons are to blame? Maybe they are. Or do you think it's just time has gone by and not too much has changed?
I think it's a combination. I think even though the dungeons were linear in Legion, I feel like you were required to play more count or more trash in the dungeons. I feel like they have, since Legion, made the dungeons more casual friendly with every expansion. Removing trash, making it, just go the same path, just run through the dungeon, and you're gonna have enough count to, finish the dungeon. You don't need to go on a crazy trip and then pull another pack. Just whatever is in front of you, kill it, and it's gonna be almost perfect count, right? And then of course it's 2 packs on the side, so you can choose to swap. But in Legion we had this like other elements we could swap gear, and it was now there was just more stuff to it, and they've been removing parts of it. It's been going backwards instead of forward. In Legion you had gear swapping and you had like non-AoE caps, right, for example. And then in BFA they removed gear swapping, and Pilot was a bunch of stuff to remove, right? And it went kind of backwards instead of forward. And then from BFA to Shadowlands they also made every class target capped, so you can't even pull big anymore. And it's just the dungeons are not better. I feel like they're more linear in Shadowlands. I might be wrong about this, maybe a feeling I just have, but it hasn't been progressing at all. It's just going, they keep removing fun elements of dungeons from expansion to expansion instead of adding more to it. People loved, doing a big pull in Legion or BFA, oh my god, I did 2 million DPS here. And now it's like, oh, wait, pull more than 5 mobs, bro? I don't think that's wise, dude. I think maybe seize that one guy and play him after, because we are gonna damage him anyway.
I mean, fire mages don't seem to really care.
yeah, that's the one exception, I guess, and that's why every team always brings them, is because they're still the only class that can actually play its full potential in dungeons. And I feel like they just made it more casual friendly and less fun, because now it's just for the casual player who doesn't have really thrive to do the highest key possible. It's just easier. He goes in and he does this weekly. He knows what's up. It's just easier to play, but it's not more fun if you're actually interested in playing the game.
Xyro, from the casting perspective of this, because you've been around as a while as well. I remember when you first started in MDI. What do you think about the dungeon quality, for lack of a better term, or linearity, or the lack of creativity the teams can put in terms of various pulls? Because I think you'll agree with me saying that it's cool to see something, let's say, like Eye of Ashara, right? One team goes left, one team goes right. And then it's like, oh, this is neat to cast. Who knows what's going to happen? What do you think?
I think, yeah, there definitely is a little bit more linearity in the current set of dungeons than there was dating back to Legion. Like there were more choices in Legion, it felt like, but maybe that was just honeymoon phase. I just think the overall dungeon design is way worse. Like trash is very punishing. It's a lot more kick based now versus when back in Legion it was pretty much just AoECC until you had none left and then hope the pull was dead. It's a lot more intricate now. You need a lot of single target like mob control now. And yeah, it just doesn't feel as good, I don't think. Like the current dungeons just feel worse to me in general.
And people just what's fun to people is doing massive damage and seeing massive numbers on the screen. Like I could play the most basic class in the world. I could spam my 3 key for 10 minutes, but if I did a lot of damage, it would be fun to play, right? But if I do that and I don't do any damage, it's a boring class. And people love doing damage and blasting, pulling big. And they just keep removing that every expansion, and that's why I think people are starting to dislike dungeons, because it's just so much effort for so little kind of reward back. Because in Legion, was nothing better than as a DK getting that mass grip, seeing the group thrive to the sky from just doing so much damage, and everyone had a good time, right? And it was not too much to think about. But now it's like, okay, pull 5 mobs, we need to have 2 kicks on this guy, we need to stun this guy on that cast. Then we need to maybe it's too much effort for little to no reward, it feels like.
So the pendulum, JB, in trash difficulty from Legion to Shadowlands now has definitely swung from one direction to another. Do you think Legion was optimal, or maybe somewhere in between? Like, was it a little too much in Legion? Just pull half the room with the boss and we're good, and just cleave it down, don't have to care, just coordinate two rounds of AoE stuns, versus obviously SL now it's like 3 mobs can be super dangerous, multiple things, not only you have to soft kick but also just hard CC for interrupts, etc. Where do we stand? And by extension, of course, what do you think of the dungeons as well?
Well, I mean, first off, there's a reason we call it trash. I mean, there's a reason it's not like bosses and other notable but slightly less important mobs. It's trash. Like I think the whole point of trash is that, back from the beginning of WoW, the idea was that there are certain bosses in the game that are important, and then there's the dumb stuff that you have to do in between it. And I don't think anybody really wants trash to be meaningfully difficult and have a lot of mechanics and stuff that you're having to deal with. I think people just want trash because it's AoE, and AoE is fun, and you don't get a lot of AoE on bosses. And so I feel like the idea of trash is that it should, not that it should be easy, but that there shouldn't necessarily be a lot of mechanics on trash, and that the difficulty of trash should be its volume, not its complexity. And one of the things, as I was thinking back through like Legion and BFA, there was a damage profile that existed in those two expansions that no longer exists. And that was with either Sub Rogue or with Unholy DK, where you would pull a lot of stuff onto a boss simply because the extra stuff made you do more damage to the one guy. And like no class, or at least none of the classes in the meta right now, do that anymore. You're no longer incentivized to pull a lot of stuff onto one boss because you can use all that stuff to deal more damage to the boss. It's just like even cleave across the board now. And when Robin posted the thing about watching the Legion MDI, I also went back and watched the Legion MDI, and I remembered these dungeons where you would drag a bunch of stuff onto a boss, and the Sub Rogue would be like, "Don't kill any of it. Leave it all alive." Like the whole point of this is not to touch any of the other trash. I need this to all live so that I can funnel all my damage into the boss. And then when it's all dead, then you can kill the rest of it. And I felt like that made more interesting pulls. You had more sort of complexity in the way that you pulled things. Not every pull was straightforward, in a way that I feel like now every pull is straightforward. Like there's no sort of interest, with like Unholy DKs, a lot of times in BFA, you wanted to pull big because they could do a ton of damage, but you also a lot of times wanted to have like one mob in there that was especially important, because then they would just focus off that mob while doing their AoE, and that doesn't happen. There's like no priority damage anymore, and it's just like, grab everything and blow it up. And like you can't bring a lot of these target capped classes because they do more damage to certain mobs than others, and it makes the pack uneven, and it's just made, I think, a lot of these pulls more frustrating, because nobody wants a 5 target. Like nobody wants a 5 target cap. Like I guess that's what, at the end of the day, the part about this that is most frustrating is that there are times when it feels like Blizzard makes decisions that are for nobody. Like I understand sometimes players have different desires in the game, and different factions of the player base want different things, but I feel like nobody saw a 5 target cap in Shadowlands and was like, yes, dude, I love doing damage to 5 things at a time. That's exactly why I signed up for World of Warcraft. I feel like everybody was like, wait, who's this for? Like, who's this change for? And like, I get that maybe there was this design decision from Blizzard where they wanted to make like maybe some broad spectrum of damage dealing, where like some classes are more single target and some classes are more AoE, and maybe try to mix it up and give different classes different specialties. But I don't think you can ever balance around that. That seems like a pipe dream. And instead what you've got, I mean, anybody could have told you that the mage meta right now, the fire mage meta, that like that was, you could see that coming from a mile away. Like one class has uncapped AoE and the ability to pop an enormous cooldown on 1 minute, basically. Like, you don't have to be an expert in the MDI meta to know that class was going to be insanely powerful.
I mean, the only reason Mage is even so powerful is because it was the only class I feel like they forgot to cap to 5 targets. And that's the only reason you played the Fire Mage, because it's the only class that still has, the potential it had from before. And imagine if other classes, had uncapped AoE, they would be probably like better, to some extent. But it's like they forgot to cap this one class, and now this is the class that everyone wants to play, and that should like be a sign that no one wanted this. It's everyone wants to play mage because this is the only class that can do the damage, properly to AoE, and it's yeah.
Do you think this AoE capping issue is more of like a dungeon thing? We're getting a bit off track here, but I'm curious. This AoE capping's more of a dungeon relevant thing, right? I mean, usually you're in the 1 to 5 target range in raiding. Yeah, sometimes obviously you get that encounter where there's like a bunch of smallies, you cleave them down, etc. But a little more rarely. And I mean, we know how little or how much attention, or somewhere in between, Blizzard gives to M+ in terms of it being the pioneer for tuning in class changes. Xyro.
Yeah, I mean it's 100% dungeon based, right? Like in raids, you really only have like two profiles, right? You have your pure single target / focus damage, and then you have like your spread dot and maybe like 2 target cleave. There's almost never like mass AoE, and then usually when there is, it's some meme boss that's like the first boss in the raid or something, right? So it's purely dungeon based tuning, and I completely agree with what JB was saying. Like when we saw those target caps to pretty much every melee class and most ranged classes, the question was like, who is this for? Like nobody wants this. This is just tuning for the sake of tuning. There's no real reason behind it.
Okay.
Do you know why they did that, Sloot? Like
the
capping targets?
I mean, yeah, let me just open my DMs with Ian right now. And no, but like obviously they don't tell me directly, but knowing them and playing this game for so many years and the design is JB is actually pretty much, I think, on the money. What they wanted to do was create niches where you have like a specialization of, single, maybe 2 target, then you have a specialization of 5 to 6 target, and then you have uncapped AoE specialization, so that you have different tools to try and problem solve different situations in dungeons. But at the end of the day, dungeons a lot of the time come down to how much can we pull and cleave down, right? And if the limiting factor is, well, this class can only do 5 and this class can do unlimited, you're going to bring the unlimited class, because even in a 5 target situation, I think you guys will agree what's happened. The classes that can only hit 5 don't particularly specialize in 5 target, right, JB? Like, it's not like the 5 cleave target classes are doubling the damage of uncapped AoE classes on 5 targets.
Yeah, I mean, like in a lot of ways, you talk about like having tools for a job, and in some ways, it's like the MDI as a competition only wants one tool. Like if having this single target versus 2 target cleave, 5 target uncapped, if it's like having an entire toolbox of like hammers and wrenches and stuff, and then the MDI comes along, and what is the MDI? It's like literally a wood sawing competition. And like if I've got one saw in my toolbox, like guess what's coming out during the MDI? Like I don't give a shit how many hammers you have in your toolbox. I don't give a shit how good your screwdriver is. When you've got a competition where the only thing you want to do is saw the hell out of some wood, then you're going to bring the best saw in the toolkit, which is Fire Mage right now. It's like the only thing that does really nice AoE damage. And that's the entire point of the MDI, is like you're trying to make these enormous pulls. So I don't give a shit how good you are at doing 2 target cleave. I'm not trying to do 2 target cleave in the MDI. That's not what we're here to do. Kill 2 targets at a time. We're here to kill like 15 things at a time. And so building, a nice niche for a class on 2 to 3 target cleave is like, that's entirely outside the scope of dungeons. Like it makes your class pointless in an MDI setting.
Robin, since you asked, with that knowledge of at least likely why they did it, what do you think?
No, I don't know what it is. Like I don't see any benefit of doing it if it wouldn't be to like there was too much data being or something tracked at the same time or something, because it was too many numbers lagging the game or something like that would be my guess to it or something. But because to me, like everyone who ever played this game, you never had less fun doing more damage. Like the more damage you did, the more fun you had. And that's why I was so confused with it in the first place, that just kind of cap it to 5 targets because we don't want you to do a lot of damage.
Okay. Let's move over in the kind of final topic area that I want to do, because I know we're hitting that soon enough 2-hour mark, and well, we all got dungeons to go grind, I'm sure, right? So let's circle. We've already touched on this a lot. Let's circle back to the current MDI format and what we can do. We've identified a lot of problems, so what can we do to address some of these problems? And I want to kick it off with something we mentioned earlier, but how do we still feel now about a seasonal MDI where there's cups and finally a grand land and it goes on for several months, rather than more of an event-based thing, something like the Race to World First? Obviously not the same format, but MDI happens, bam, 1 big, maybe 2 big times a year. There's no gathering points for several weeks up to it. What do you think of these 2 formats, JB? I'll start off with you.
Well, I do in a lot of ways look back at the first Legion MDI that I participated in as being one of my most enjoyable MDI experiences. And I think it was because you had one time trial that lasted for a week. and then you had your one regional tournament, and then you had grand finals. And the now they, I think we ended up practicing a lot more that season than we would have otherwise had to, because Blizzard hadn't yet figured out how to limit practice time. But assuming that that was the schedule going forward of like one time trial, one regional cup, and then one grand final, you could fit all that into about 6 weeks probably. And I feel like that would be like a perfect amount of time. And there would be a lot of time in there. Like during that month when everyone was doing their regional cup, there would have been, you wouldn't have to necessarily focus on the MDI. You could be off doing other stuff. And I guess at the end of the day, what I really want from the MDI is for it to not feel like it's taking over my life. And also, like, I want to play World of Warcraft. Like, I want to be able to continue doing stuff on the live server when the MDI is happening. Like right now, I've basically had to tell my guild that, you know, like a lot of the guys in the MDI don't necessarily have this problem because there's a large overlap with guys in like top 10 guilds in the world, and people who compete in the MDI. And so a lot of them had the luxury of finishing this raid before the MDI kicked off. But like for me, I think we were still on, who was it, like Enerva when the MDI started. And I basically had to tell my guild, like, hey, I just got to be gone for 2 months. I don't have time to raid. The practice schedule is way too intense for me to be able to show up. I might be able to make like one raid a week. And it's like, let me play your game. Like the MDI should never take so much of my time that I literally can't even maintain a character on live servers while the MDI is happening. And it's, it's one of the problems with the MDI compared to like the Race World First is the Race World First eats up a ton of your time, but at the end of it, you have a character that is now like one of the best characters in the game. Like you've now finished the raid on this character. It's geared out the ass. And even though you've invested a lot of time, at the end of it, there's something to show for it. When I go to compete in the MDI, I invest all this time on the tournament realm, and at the end of it, there's nothing to show for it aside from the prize money. And so like the amount of time it pulls me away from live servers should be as small as possible. I don't want it to take away my time to play your game that I enjoy playing and feel like it's sort of like empty time spent.
Okay. Robin?
I'm for one, like it was in Legion as well. One, regional cup and then one global cup. But I'm for it for a different reason. And I think that is strat making and pathing is what I enjoy almost the most in MDI. And I feel with having multiple cups every season with a seasonal epics takes away from that. Because even if we have a 6 strat, we know that in the next cup, that strat is going to be useless, right? Or people are going to do the same. And in order to maintain a good strat, we need to come up with something new and new and new instead of, just having this one really, really sick strat that we work on, right? And that's why also I feel like the cups are kind of boring because it's always the first cup of a new season or a new expansion. It is wild things happening in this cup because no one knows, what the other team is going to do. No one has seen what the quickest pathing is, just, what you think. And that was the same case in like Legion. Everyone was doing different stuff because no one had, ever seen the other teams doing something before. So the variety was way bigger and the difference in pathing was way bigger than it is now because it's only really Cup 1 in every season that is, kind of interesting where you see a lot of teams really come up with their own strats because at Cup 3, we're going to have a mix of, we took something from JB's team and then, was the Perplex did something and we take that into our own strat and everything just looks very similar instead of having this, once, doing this once where, we've been working on this for like 2 weeks and this is the one time where it really, really matters. And that's a lot more fun to me and it's a lot more fun to watch as well, I think, because there's this sick, strats coming up once and not the same over and over and over.
Xyro, what about you? But from, a bit more so from like the casting internal side of it, in terms of tournament format and what do you think would be better?
Well, I actually do completely disagree with you guys. I don't think the Legion format is good for a lot of reasons. I think you guys might be forgetting like how much of a time investment there was back then for it. Week-long time trials, which admittedly at the time was fun because it was new, but I think nowadays that'd be pretty bland. But then because of the way the regional things worked, we had the dungeons in advance for the tournament for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, but you could start. You could change that. You could just not give you could just give us a week to practice. Like that,
sure,
that's a very changeable thing.
Right. But the way it was back then, it was pretty miserable in terms of practice time. Now, I agree, you could change that, you could iterate on it, but for what it was back then, it was not fun in the slightest. And I think it was an improvement to go to the format that we have right now. I think that it'd be a lot easier now to take the format that we have right now and make changes to it to make it more agreeable for you guys, for sure. Like 2-day time trials, I think would cut down on pretty much a majority of the pain points, right? I think that'd be a lot better. But I think a lot of people feel like the prize pool needs to be increased, and I don't think that's really something that's possible in the current format of the way the MDI is, right? You can't look at the MDI as the MDI by itself, right? You have to look at WoW esports as a whole. And between AWC and MDI, Blizzard's investing something like $1.6 million for the year in terms of prize pool, in addition to broadcast costs, production costs, caster costs, all that stuff. And without some sort of investment from somebody else or some sort of like sponsorship, I don't think that's going to be able to go up too much.
I mean, it's kind of like an Ouroboros, chasing your own tail thing going on here, because to get more investment and budget from corporate, you need to produce higher numbers, right? And get people rolling. And it's hard to produce higher numbers and, stimulate player involvement, et cetera, if you don't have the higher budget. So, where do we start, right? Like, what do we do for that then?
But you're never gonna get higher numbers unless you change something.
Well, exactly.
Right, that's the problem.
Yeah, but you're saying like that you don't like the Legion style. But what we have now is, in my opinion, a lot worse, because the players don't enjoy play it, and the viewers don't enjoy watch it. It's just a lose-lose situation, because no one wants to sit and play MDI for 8 weeks straight, 10 to 12 hours a day, and not a viewer enjoys seeing the same maps and the same strats and the same comps for 4 cups straight either. So at least when you have the Legion stuff, it's something that happens kind of like, whatever that thing that's happened in the state, when it's just happening once every 6 months or something like that, it's enjoyable to watch. It's something you haven't seen in a long time. But it's like sitting here and watching, the same stuff for 4 weeks. Like no one, it's not enjoyable to play and it's not enjoyable to watch. And then that has to change. And then you need to change the format, if anything, or change how the MDI works. And it's
and I would compare that back again to like the Race to World First, where when you watch the Race to World First, it's super exciting, and like everything, like every boss is like, it's enjoyable. And admittedly, by the time you get to the last boss, you've put in a few hundred attempts, maybe by like pull 200, you're starting to be like, all right, if you guys could kill it now, that'd be really cool. But like, I think everyone enjoys watching the Race to World First. It gets really good engagement, like literally 24/7 throughout the course of it. But if you tried to do the Race to World First every week, like for 2 months in a row, if you try to do 2 weeks of Race to World First and then reset it and do 2 weeks of Race to World First again, now that everyone has seen everyone's strats on the bosses, and you like did a fresh reset, and you're like, all right, we're going to race again. Okay. And then 2 weeks later, all right, we're going to reset the bosses and we're going to race again. All right. And we're going to do that a 4th time. By the final Race to World First, nobody would give a shit, because it's like, dude, I've seen all these bosses die. I know exactly what they're going to do. I know exactly what classes they're going to bring. There is nothing interesting anymore about this. It was cool the first time, but this 3rd and 4th time that we're doing it, like, why are we here? What are we watching? And I feel like you run into that with the MDI, where, yeah, certainly you want to see a team run a dungeon really fast, and there are slight improvements that teams make from week to week, and the affix has changed a little bit, and that does make some of the dungeons a little bit different. But for the most part, you've seen the teams do these dungeons at maybe like 95% of maximum capacity, and now you're just, each week you're trying to figure out how to get that last like 2%, 3% on the dungeon. And it's like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see the Race World First 4 times in a row. I just want to see it the one time, and then I want to take a break until you come out with a new race.
I definitely understand that, but I think I'm looking at it from a more realistic viewpoint of, they're not just going to completely blow up the current format and completely change it overnight for the next season, right? They're just going to iterate on what we already have. So, I think that's more realistic viewpoint to come at it from.
Do you guys, from your various viewpoints, how strongly do you feel about the MDI is trying too hard to mimic a PvP esport when it's not, right? And as a result, should the format change? It's kind of the overarching theme.
I feel like it's not trying to mimic a PvP esport. It's trying to mimic a Dota 2 competition. Like they think WoW esport is bigger than it is, and it sounds maybe bad to say, but this is not the biggest esport in the world. We don't have multiple sponsored teams and investors and broadcasting sponsors to supplement like trying to make this a big, thing, and it's always gonna have, its, crowd and the people who enjoys watching it. I'm one of those, and I think it's great, but it's just we're trying to make it something it's not. Like MDI is never gonna be the big thing, It's always gonna attract the same, PvE audience who enjoy doing M+, but you can't make it into a enormous big tournament expecting, everyone to sign up and play and invest so many hours, because it's not what it is. It never was this, and will never be this either. And I feel like that's the biggest issue, that they think that they can compare it to the biggest esports in the world, and it's never gonna be that way.
So you don't think there's any room for growth?
I think it's room for growth, but it's not like what they're doing now is that, they're just enforcing it to, or they compare it to the biggest esports, there are, and then that's not the case for MDI, and then they need to understand like where it's coming from, and who's watching it and who's playing it, and like if you compare it to like the biggest esports, like MDI people, it's not like we have 20 teams with sponsors and a salary competing in MDI. We're like, most people have a normal job, they have a family, they have a life outside of MDI, and they're not going to be able to put in the same amount of time as other esports, for example. It's not, it's just different. And of course it can grow, but it needs to grow in the right way, and just, making it a 4 or 8 week event but with this amount of, practice time, it's not the right way to go. And I mean, if you want to keep going this way, sure, but it's going to kill MDI. Like, players are going to stop playing. I, like, personally, I've had a very hard time even, like, wanting to play MDI because it's too much. I still want to do other things in my life, and MDI is not the only thing I do in WoW, right? I love MDI. I would always love MDI, but I don't want to spend 40+ hours for over 3 months playing MDI because the rewards are not there for it. If I had a big salary and an insane prize money, sure, stuff might change, but we all want to play MDI from time to time because we really enjoy it. And yeah, I don't know how to put it in a better way. It's just that feels like they've made it something which is not. And yeah, I guess that's my take on it.
I feel like every esport at the end of the day has to be exciting in some fashion. Every esport lives and dies on how exciting it is. And the MDI stops being exciting after especially after the first cup. It stops being exciting. You know what you're going to see. The question is whether the team can execute. You know what every team's in here going to try to do. The first cup is exciting because you're seeing new routes. You're seeing every team's first take on a dungeon. You're seeing what the class meta is going to be. When we came into this season, it was like, what's everybody going to play? There's a few classes I have in mind, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe somebody figures out something I wasn't expecting. But after that first cup, it's not exciting anymore. Like people do these dungeons, and it's expected. You already know, even without having seen any of these teams' routes yet for the week. I already have a pretty good idea of what every team's going to be doing. Maybe they do a few changes that I wasn't expecting, but for the most part, I know what I'm looking for. I know what classes are going to be running. I know what times to expect in each dungeon. The first week of the MDI, I had no idea. It's like you go into halls and you're like, all right, we just did a 16-minute halls. Is that good or is it dog shit? I have no idea. I had
that same exact feeling, and I love that feeling. That's what I want to have. And it was like what you had in Legion, like the first week of the time plus we went in there, and we were happy about a 60-minute run in halls, and I was see out of nowhere Perplex coming out with a 1505, and I'm like, holy, how did I do this? We had no clue what they did, and you don't get that same feeling doing 4 cups because you know exactly, almost from step to step, what every single team is gonna do, and it's not, it gets boring to watch and it gets boring to play, and that's just how it is. People are gonna disagree with this. Maybe people do enjoy playing this and watching this for 4 weeks straight, but if you want to keep this format, something has to change. You need to have different, ban something, make players completely suffer, change something. It doesn't work.
What I would love to see, and I don't know what the viability of this would be because I'd have to rebalance everything. I would love to see every MDI week they just have 2 flashback dungeons from Legion or BFA added to the pool, and that would be something.
Always freehold.
Yeah, it's always freehold or like Cathedral.
or King's
or
Rest.
lower Karazhan. One of the good dungeons.
But I'm saying, like, JB, you can agree with me here. When you saw like the host run, you were like in your head, like, okay, so what the hell did these teams actually do? What did I do that we didn't do? I that's the feeling, I really love having when I play MDI. I'm like, did we actually do the smartest thing here, or what did we miss? And you never get that feeling apart from Cup 1 in every season, pretty much.
Yeah, the first time trials, when you start seeing, team doing like a dungeon like a minute and a half faster than you, and you're like, all right, that's not just them playing cleaner. And then you start going through, that's like the best part is when you start going through all the crazy shit in your head of like, did they try to drag a shard of Halkias onto the boss? Like, how do you shave a minute and a half off this dungeon? And that's when you really just start getting just, out of your mind of like all the different stuff. Like, well, what could you do to add to take a minute and a half off this? And when you start getting some really creative stuff, and then once you actually see all these teams, do their route, and then you finally see like, oh, okay, yeah, they did those two pulls together, and then after that, then it gets less fun because where every team got their time gains from, and what the best, there's no more uncertainty. You've seen every team try every pack one time at least, and you just know that like, all right, this is objectively a better pack to pull than the rest of them, and I've seen a team pull these two packs together, so I know it's possible, and I feel like you just start settling in to kind of a rut. Every once in a while you'll get a big change in a dungeon throughout the season. I remember a good example of that is like a tall in BFA. It used to be that you would always go right first or maybe down the middle and drop down to Razan. And then all of a sudden one week, like Echo starts going left and everyone's like, what the fuck? Who goes left in a tall? That's ridiculous. But like, that's very rare that a dungeon has like a big meta changing path like that, where somebody just tries a totally different thing and it changes the way everybody does the dungeon. For the most part, once you see a team run a dungeon well at the start of a season, you just get minor variations of that route.
So it seems Xyro a bit not as much, although some of the concern was, from like practice and player formatting. But I think we're all kind of reaching an agreement here that a seasonal format to the MDI is maybe not the best, and we should move it more to like a one done bang kind of event based thing, maybe 1-2 times a year, maybe with like, it happens once over the course of 2 to 3 sessions, time trial, like one regional final and then a LAN, something like that, maybe to coincide with the seasons of the expansion itself. Anybody want to have any last mentions about format of the MDI? Xyro kind of threw it under the bus there. Do you have any other, after listening to these guys?
I think the biggest problem with going from the format that we have right now back to some sort of seasonal thing like that is that it kind of stunts the growth plan that Blizzard has for it, which in the current format hasn't happened at all, right? There hasn't been nearly any growth for a number of reasons. But lowering the number of hours that are available for people to watch doesn't really help the future potential growth of the program at all. And I think that would be like a negative connotation for, people wanting to get bigger prize pools later on.
Okay, fair.
But how does keeping a 4-week cup stage increase the growth when people don't even want to watch it? People don't even want to tune in for Cup 4 because they've seen it 3 times before. How does that increase the growth?
I mean, you say that, but the numbers don't really go down that much. Yes, there's a big drop from the first week to the second week in terms of like cup play, but the third and fourth week are about the same as the second week every time.
But why don't we just stop doing cups at that point? We'll just you talked about the one-off events that Blizzard has planned, and like, why don't we just make a whole shitload of one-off events? Like, these don't all have to culminate into one big grand finals. You could do, you're like, well, let's do the plus 18s week where everybody runs an 18, and then the next event is going to be who can push a 25 first. We're going to give every team a 25 necrotic wake, and whoever can get a 25 necrotic wake done first wins. And like, you just keep doing different types of events. But I feel like the biggest barrier right now to the MDI is the fact that it all ties together into some big point system. And if you're a team that can't commit to 3 months, and really how many people can, then you've effectively excluded yourself from the competition. Even though there's a lot of guys out there that are really good at doing keys that could absolutely compete with everybody that's in the MDI right now, the length of time that is one continuous season is totally unreasonable, and it doesn't need to be that way at all. And you could get, like as you said, you get really good viewership numbers on the first cup and it drops off to the second one. I have a solution. Let's not have a cup 2 anymore, or a cup 3 or a cup 4. Let's do a totally different thing. And you can still have, your events each week. I'm not even saying you have to do less events. I know Blizzard has to fill the calendar with esports stuff, but like stop making it into one season. Just make it a bunch of standalone stuff. And then if you want to compete one weekend and not the next, guess what? You can do that. Like if your buddy's busy that weekend, you're like, all right, we'll take this one off and not worry about it torpedoing our entire season.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that working too. There definitely needs to be changes to the format, but like I said, I don't think cutting down on the hours is going to help in terms of growth whatsoever.
No, it might be true, but then something has to change, right? Like the cups
for
need
sure,
to be
100%.
different from each other, and then you might still have your growth, right? But then you're gonna make the players who participate suffer, and by having to either practice more, practice less, feel like JB said that we can't have a good run, we have to have a suboptimal run, and it's not as fun to play instead of having this one-time event where people really want to show off what they've been working on all this time. And if you can get people to sign up for this with the changes, it might be viewers are gonna love it to see his team wipe and struggle, and are players gonna sign up for this and enjoy it? I don't know, but currently it's not working, and yeah, the fix, who knows, but maybe there's one.
I don't really think there's just one mega big solution fix that's going to fix the myriad of problems we've laid out, but I think you guys have definitely had some really good suggestions. One more topic on this kind of tournament design rules thing I want to open up, and I'll start with you again, JB, since we started with you on the last one as well. The format, the regional format. I know there's been a lot of complaints about how the China format's laid out and teams barely get to participate, that barely have to participate there, and they basically move right on to the global finals, etc. What do you guys see as the optimal world regional kind of structure for the MDI?
Well, it's hard to have these conversations around China without it feeling like I'm attacking like Chinese players, which I'm not doing. Like clearly China has some really good Mythic Plus players. We've seen several of the Chinese teams do live keys as fast as anyone in the world. So they obviously have really good players. None of them seem to give a shit about the MDI, or they can't compete in the. I've heard, for various reasons that either they get banned. I know that's a totally different kind of environment over in China, where I think like real money transactions are rampant there, and players get banned or suspended very frequently. I've heard that several players can't compete in the MDI even if they'd like to, because their accounts are not in good standing. But for whatever reason, the Chinese have shown that when given their own region, they just don't take it seriously. And you have no shows, and you have times that are just completely, like a dozen minutes slower than what you see from their Western counterparts. And so if obviously there's some directive from on high at Blizzard to continue including China in the broadcast for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it's inclusiveness, or if it's just such a strong demographic that they feel that they make good money from. I don't know what exactly it is, but if you're going to continue to include China, I feel like you just give it its own MDI at this point. Like stop making some global MDI, and just give China its own MDI, and then keep like Western MDI to itself. I feel like that would fix a lot of things. Obviously, then there's a disparity in terms of the strength of teams from each region as they currently have existed. If you split up the remainder of it into like North America and like Australia, Pacific, and then EU, obviously we've seen a lot more strength out of the EU in terms of the number of teams that are kind of at that top level. So if any suggestion was like, well, we should have like an NA region and an EU region, it's like, well, that probably doesn't feel exactly fair, because we've seen in the past that there's, probably like 2 really good EU teams for every really good NA team, if not more. And so it's maybe not fair to just split it down the line like that. I had actually heard a suggestion from somebody that I thought was really interesting, of doing a time trial, like the one time trial at the start of a season, and then using that to form groups similar to what you'd see in like the World Cup, where rather than splitting it by region, you would try to make groups with similar skill profiles. And so you would take maybe you'd have like 4 groups that come out of the time trials, and you'd take the number 1 team and you'd put it in group A, and the number 2 team goes in group B, and the number 3 team goes in group C. And then you would go through and you would try to get the number of really good teams spread out in the groups and the number of bad teams spread out through the groups. And you try to make each group roughly similar in terms of overall skill level. And then I don't know exactly how you do a tournament with those groups, but that would be a way to take region out of the equation and instead try to make it strictly based on the relative skill levels of the teams.
Okay. Robin, what do you think?
I lost track of the original question. I was listening to Biva about the China and everything. What was that?
Is it because his shirt matches the blanket behind him? I can't stop staring at that.
It is actually uncanny. I hadn't noticed that, but
to surmise, Robin, the question was essentially, how do you feel about the regional format and the fact that China gets their own thing and they don't, really compete and then et cetera, et cetera. So how would you change it? Like, what would you like to see for regional setup?
I think, I don't know, it's a hard one because it's all about, making sure that, every team gets to play at a comfortable time, right? Because everyone is from different time zones in the world. I think just, from a competitive point, I think mashing everyone into like a big group of, anything can happen is what I would like to see, because I don't want to go 8 weeks without being able to completely destroy JB and Mist, for example. But it's
true.
I don't know. I like being able to just face my opponents before the globals. And now we're not gonna be able to see China. I don't know what to expect on their teams from what I've seen so far. It's kind of weird. They have so many teams for like time trials, for example, but they have no teams for the cups. I don't know what's different in China compared to globals. But for example, like we had 8 teams in time trials, 9 or something. They had, I think, like 40 almost. They never done it, or 30 or something, but they had 2 teams in the cup. I was like, huh? It's just weird. I don't even know why they have their own region, and I just feel like just mash everything together and let the best fight the best and let everyone join, kind of. But if people don't want that, I wouldn't mind going back to what we had with EU and China and NA and Oceanic, I guess.
Big X, what do you think? I know you're a little more privy to these discussions. At least I was when I was there too, so I know it's people's opinions definitely matter. How do you like the current format?
Well, there's no love lost in the China region. As long as I don't ever have to cast a China game ever again, I'm very happy. For reference, back when we were in Columbus 2 years ago casting the China region, we would change our sleep schedule literally every single week. So we would wake up, normal times, current MDI schedule, wake up like 7 a.m., do a normal cast, like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the NA EU Cups. And then for the China region, we'd flip our schedule, wake up at 8 p.m., get into the office, start our cast at 10 p.m., and then cast until like 5 a.m. And almost every single China Cup, there would be like 2 or 3 no-shows. It's like, you guys can't even show up for the cup that you came for. So I don't care that we don't have to do anything. As long as if they have their own separate thing entirely and we don't have to worry about them, I would love that. Like, I don't really care about that region anymore, especially now that none of the good players can play because they're all banned. So yeah, don't care about China at all. Yeah.
Because I heard that they all got banned and no of the good teams could.
They do RMT like crazy over there. Like that's just all they do. Like their progression raid teams are full of RMT pilot accounts. People pay for them for their accounts to be in during progression. That's just how the China region works.
In game.
Yeah. But like, yeah, no, I think our global finals should just be all 8 like non-Chinese teams. Like let them run their own event. They don't really like correlate with our event at all. And now I feel like.
Okay. So just separate, right? Pretty much what I'm hearing from all 3 of you. All right, we're reaching the end of the show here, so we'll leave it on the following. A last kind of thought from each one of you guys. Could be about MDI, maybe M+ more specifically, whatever you want to say, to not necessarily summarize everything, but to kind of, leave your last thought here for the show. JB, what do you think?
So going back to one of the points raised earlier in this show. I know that a lot gets made about the role of Mythic Plus in World of Warcraft, sort of where it stands compared to other forms of content. And I guess one of the things, everybody knows how I feel about where Mythic Plus stands, but I guess I would like to see Mythic Plus treated, I guess, for Blizzard to make up its mind one way or the other. Like if it's going to be a standalone esport, if it's going to be worthy of being a standalone esport, I feel like it should be worthy of being considered a sort of pillar of end game content, and that it should not be Raid Junior. And that if this is a thing that Blizzard is going to take seriously as an esport, that it should be taken that seriously on Live WoW as well. And if they're not going to take it that seriously on Live WoW, then just, let's stop pretending like it's worthy of being an esport in that case, and just put it on the back burner. And so mostly I just want to get like a clear signal from Blizzard here, how they feel about the Mythic Plus format, and once and for all. And then once they've made their mind up, just stick to that.
Okay. Robin?
Well,
Final thoughts?
remove night elves, remove class buffs, buff blood decay.
We actually didn't talk much about the Shadow Meld thing. I mean, if you want to impart that.
Remove it. Remove the game. Remove it. I don't think anyone likes to play night elf. It's just you're just forced into one race and you can't do anything about it. You just lose if you don't play it. No one likes it. No one wants it. I don't know. It's gone too far in my opinion, because you just do weird stuff with it. I don't like it. It's
okay.
apart from that, yeah. I guess I don't know. I might sound like really negative, and I'm sorry for that. I hate seeing the way MDI is going, and I truly care for MDI. I've been doing MDI since the very, very first, tournament and cup, and I really truly care for it. That's why I'm here talking about it. I just hate seeing it going down this, it's going the wrong way in my opinion, and it's less fun to play and less fun to watch, and I really hope they figure out a way to turn it around and make it something really enjoyable again.
All right. And Big X?
I think MDI is such a weird, competitive format. I think Blizzard is really torn on what to do with it, like whether they want to make it like a competitive esport event or if they want it to be sort of an exhibition of, what the game has to offer. Because it always feels like it goes back and forth between those two, and it never really settles on a concrete identity. And I think in order for it to be a better viewing experience or player experience, they just need to settle on one of the two things. It can't just be in limbo in between the two like it is right now. And I think that's something that needs to change this year. Otherwise, it's just going to start dying out.
Okay. Now let's go back to Twitch, right? I don't think that's really their call, unfortunately. But all right, gents. Well, thank you for the chat. It was great. I know Robin has to get to bed. He needs his beauty sleep. But guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. I'll throw this on YouTube later for whoever didn't see. And I wish you guys, well, all of you, luck in the upcoming cast and competition. I'll be rooting from the sidelines. But yeah, guys, thanks a lot. Sorry?
Who are you rooting for?
He's in A now, so he has to root for us. Those are the rules.
But you're EU now.
But not in the MDI. That's the only thing that really counts.
I root for the Kendu Spirits and the Golden Guardians.
I root for whoever dies the most, so.
Yeah, that's still us. I still take that one.
Fair.
How aggressive I got this one, I guess.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I won't keep you any longer. Keep in touch. Maybe we'll do another one of these post, before the next season when we have some time, because it's always great hearing your guys' input. So thanks a lot for coming, and I will see you guys soon.
See you guys.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks.
Later, dudes.